evening, ladies and gentlemen of the ensemble. I suppose you think I'm the prompter. I'm not. I am the conductor. This is my answer to outdoor opera. Singing opera in the out of doors is like painting with oils underwater. I don't claim the art suffers, but the artist does. The orchestra may have a bit of difficulty seeing me, but I am also less of a target for the audience should they decide to become demonstrative. I understand the soprano and the tenor have stopped fighting, so the curtain must be about to go up. But before you see tonight's opus, we present this little opera bouffe.
Welcome to the Shamley Silhouette, yet another analysis of the master of suspense, Alfred Hitchcock. I am your host, Zach Eastman. We're still in quarantine, so that's a lot of fun. That's a whole lot of fun. So we're still going to keep plugging away on the show regardless of any pandemic interferences. You know, there's plenty of ways to make a podcast. You know, you can record off of different FaceTime apps. You can do stuff on your own, or you know, you could just, make TikTok videos. You know, that's not a podcast, but hey, it's something to do, right? But thankfully, here on the Shamley Silhouette, we don't make TikTok videos. We talk about the master of suspense and the different facets and parts of his career that have come into legend. On today's show, we're going to talk about 3 films where Hitchcock found himself in a rather tricky position with each of the 3. In a sense, while these films are considered failures by comparison to the larger scope of his career, in each film we will find that he had a way of toying with ideas that would come into more masterful use down the line. Whether it's the use of music in films, whether it's his framing and his meticulous attention to detail, or if it's something as simple as his POV shots that have become so masterful as time goes on in things like Rear Window or Psycho. Here to discuss this with me is none other than a return guest who you've all loved to death. I love him to death. You can't get enough of him. He talked about 3D with us last time, and he's coming back once again to talk about Hitchcock failures, but there's some optimism in these ones because these are in the beginnings of Hitchcock's career. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Marshall Rosales.
I am honored to be back.
You are alive. I'm glad that you are alive. How you been holding up and everything?
I am holding up quite well. Really, all things considered, I've been lucky to maintain some work, and I'm working on writing a film also. So that's been keeping me busy. But yeah, been doing okay.
You're doing good. So you've been finding a way to keep busy, keep steady in all this, you know, like it doesn't take you going outside to write a script. So
no. Yeah, it's funny. I got my first full month's worth of an electric bill a little while ago, and it was literally exactly the same as it has been. So my life has not changed a ton. I'm quite the introvert.
You didn't ration your electricity.
Yes.
It's very good to know that you can continue. We've in preparation for this episode, Marshall and I have been texting back and forth, and we were talking more about 3D in the process and just sharing collections. So clearly he's been able to keep himself busy with all those different viewing experiences. You showed me a couple of titles that I hadn't even heard of. So I was very enamored by the fact that you were still collecting, like, even after like all the stuff that you've been able to find, you're finding titles that I didn't even know were 3D films, let alone didn't know they existed at all. So,
oh yeah. Well, after our last podcast on talking about 3D, it really kind of stoked a different kind of fire in me for 3D, and so I really started doing a lot of research into the original 50s, all the films that were produced in 53 and 54, and that came out then, and just started. There's 3D Film Archive is a company that has devoted themselves to going and finding these old prints and doing these amazing restorations on them and realigning the two different film tracks so that now you're able to see 3D better than literally anyone has ever been able to see before with the restoration work that they're doing. And so I just started snapping all those up because I would love to see that aspect of Hollywood history that I haven't really been exposed to before.
Right. No, and it's something that, like, when the episode did come out, and I had to go in and, touch up, boost audio and stuff, and I was just like, man, like, this is just something I wasn't really thinking actively about. And I was really glad that we were able to get that conversation down on digital access, so to speak, because I think it's one that, as we're moving forward within the industry of film itself and also the crossroads it finds itself in with the, pandemic and everything, one has to wonder if something like 3D could make a comeback as a way to attract people back into the theater, but also is it a chance for people to learn their lessons from the past, Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, I think that, I made this point in the podcast, but at the end of the day, I think it should be approached as it's another tool of filmmaking, no different than color or sound.
Yeah. And absolutely, we don't want it to be something that's just an add-on to a ticket,
Right,
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So basically what we're all saying is, guys, is that Disney needs to stop being jerks and give us their 3D films in the U.S. so that we don't have to wait for imports to be delivered,
Yes,
yeah.
Amongst a multitude of other things. Please don't kill all the old Fox titles.
Please, You see, you're fighting the 3D front. I'm fighting the overall Fox situation. I'm doing my part by letting it known that I don't like the. You know what's funny though, the name change that they made to Fox 20th Century Studios is the same company that it was before it merged with Fox Movietone. So circled back around, but this time I know what they're doing with it. So it's definitely not going to be the same situation of, man, like, we're going to get some masterful films from some wonderful filmmakers. That's not happening. That's not going to happen. And with Disney's financial troubles, they're going to lean heavier and heavier on their established properties at this point. That's all they're going to be able to do with everything going on with COVID, at least to my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen a lot of forward-thinking, artistically progressive ideas from Disney in an extremely long time. I think a lot of their successes are in large part despite the way that company has been run.
Anything they've had that's innovative is something they've acquired and not something that they've done on their own. Like whether it's through a financial or a property acquisition or a studio acquisition. Like, I really love Jojo Rabbit, and that was released under the first year of Disney having control of the Fox slate. So it was interesting because that film, I don't know if it would have done any bigger at the box office than it did, but it felt like the promotion was super skimpy by comparison to anything else Disney had on their slate. And I know that Ready or Not definitely suffered because of this. Which is a great film. If you haven't seen Ready or Not, do check it out. It has some visual qualities that are similar to a film we will be talking about today. So basically the bottom line is as film is changing and evolving amidst this situation, but also how it has been for the past 5 or 10 years. It'll be very interesting to see if some old things come back and maybe people will have learned their lesson. I highly doubt it. I don't think anybody in Hollywood ever learns their lessons. It's been made abundantly clear. But
yeah, I mean, I think Hollywood as a giant machine is made up of many parts and many people, but it really has been sort of a godhead, and the neck has always been something that the head has been trying to get control of and doesn't, and that is the audience.
Yeah.
And I think that like happened in the 70s with Easy Rider and in the 90s with Miramax, is that these different ways of approaching storytelling come into play. And if the audience likes them and they flock to them, then the neck of the audience turns the head of the giant, of a Hollywood. Yeah. And but then that becomes the norm.
Yep.
And they try to make that perfect and do the same thing over and over again until the audience gets tired of it, and some new innovative soul or souls rise and produce something else that is super attractive to an audience, and the neck turns the head again. And so I think that this pandemic situation has almost built a more fertile ground for something like that to happen than has ever happened before, because we're going to be entering an arena where all of the films that had finished production prior to the shutdown are going to have gone through post-production and be ready to go, but there will not have been anything in the pipeline for however many months this continues to go on.
Yep. And
so there's going to be some fertile ground for something else to emerge. It'll be interesting to see what it is.
So I'm just saying, we make a YouTube video and it gets Best Picture. It's very simple. Like, what's that? What was that character? Fred the YouTube star or whatever. Let him win an Oscar at this point, I guess. I don't know.
But Martin Scorsese has to deliver. Has to be the one to give the Oscar over. If that's what happens.
No, I'm not going down without a fight. No, you can't rape me.
or Chris Nolan also might be a good choice for that.
Speaking of which, he is. I will tell you, there's a story about the stuff they were doing for Tenet, and I guess they crashed an actual plane for one of the scenes in the movie, and I was like, that sounds like about as much insanity that Hitchcock would go through just to get a good practical effect going. Like,
yes,
I don't think Hitchcock would have suffered CGI lightly. But
no, well, that's like causing the actual avalanche for Revenant.
Yeah,
yeah, that's a level of filmmaking that I don't even have the guts to aspire to.
Well, now Inarritu's trying to do VR so he can put it right in your face. So,
wow.
Lovely man. I'm sure he's interesting to work for. But
yes,
yeah. But it's funny though. We were talking about the use of technology within a certain respect of like how people utilize it. Like Hitchcock's somebody who obviously was able to innovate and use new technology, but to use it to the story's advantage and not just because he could do it. So it's interesting. If he was in the realm of CGI, I'd imagine he'd use it for things that were practical to a grounded story and not necessarily like. I think the closest you'd get to like a huge effect would probably be a plane crash, but I think he would probably try to do as much of it practically as possible because this is a guy who would be able to tell what would look good and what would not look good on screen.
Yeah. So, well, I think that I've spoken before about what I call the Hitchcock boredom, and I think that like all things has two sides of the same coin, and I think that part of the boredom that Hitchcock grew to have with the process of making film allowed him to be fascinated with applying different innovative technologies or trying something new, because it was just like, oh, well, if I can try this thing in this movie, that's the only thing I'm interested about.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess I'll make a whole movie around it just so I can do this experiment.
Yeah.
Like I feel like David Fincher is a lot like that as well.
Yeah, very much so. When
looking for something to hook, to get his hooks into.
Yeah. When he found out about digital cinema, he went hog wild. Like the stories on Benjamin Button and Social Network and how many takes are done on those shoots is staggering. It's insane.
My favorite story of Fincher about digital is working on Zodiac. That apparently Robert Downey Jr. was so incensed at never being allowed to return to his trailer because they just ran take after take after take, that he started peeing in bottles and hiding them around the set.
Yep.
In protest. And I love that story with all my heart.
And that's one of those, like, that led eventually to the statement that he ended up making about just like, I'm not going to do these non-big studio films anymore because of this reason here. And I'm like, oh, that sucks. I wish it's one of many things that he said that contributed to that decision. I was just like, yeah, but you're really good and we want to see you do things.
Yeah. But the time's caught up with them, and now
Yeah.
you know everything is shot on digital, so all sets are run that way.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. So it's not like, and I'm more than sure that he didn't appreciate having to be called back for reshoot after reshoot for Avengers movies. But you know, obviously, a reshoot for Endgame gave us one of the best lines in that movie, or best moments, I guess, like a good way to cap that whole arc off for him. But we're not here to talk about Avengers, although I'm sure Hitchcock would have made a wonderful Avengers movie. We're here to talk about that would be fucking great. Okay, you Metal Man, get over there with Starman, and then ooh, that's a fucking tree. That's a huge fucking tree.
Yeah, I've watched it at least a couple times, that's for sure.
But we're here to talk about 3 different films from Hitchcock's British Gamut period. Now, we've talked about the British Gamut period all throughout the course of the series. We haven't really done an episode dedicated solely to it outside of the Lady Vanishes episode. At the time that these 3 films come out, Hitchcock has already made the transition to sound. It started with Murder, and then followed up by Blackmail. And in this time, he's making the transition from pure cinema into trying to find a way to put pure cinema into sound films and working with the technology of sound as he had never had to do before. When we talk about the transition from silent film, the key thing to notice is that there is a limitation in the onset of sound's existence where you are not able to really work with that camera the way you'd want to. Now, contrary to popular belief, the camera was able to move, and eventually was able to move so much that we get sweeping shots in movies from the late 30s and 40s because the technology had improved. But initially, it was very locked off. There's a booth off to the side. You've got to keep everything just basically in place so that everything syncs up. It's not until the sound on film process is perfected that they're able to start moving around. At the time, a lot of sound films were being done on disc. So the 3 films that we're talking about, among them, we're going to start off with one that it's very clear that this film is in the middle of him still figuring out how to transition from silent to sound. And I, of course, speak of the film No.17. No.17 is based off of a stage play by Joseph Jefferson Farrion called No.17, and the film ended up getting basically, I want to say it's a film that, much like its play, has a hard time making sense to the audience, and as a result, people were picking up on that. So it had very little to do with the technology itself and adapting to new innovative ideas, as opposed to just like the story itself was never that great to begin with. But regardless, the movie was made, and it's from 1932. So this is about, it's literally about 3 years after something like The Jazz Singer comes out and completely changes the game for an entire industry, which we haven't had a reckoning like that up until the digital era, the digital streaming era specifically, where that's the new reckoning that Hollywood is facing. And so as a result, everybody's having to change virtually everything about their entire career. A big thing to point out amidst all this, this film gets kinder reception, both to me and also, I would assume, to the critics of the era, because there's a film that comes out prior to this called Rich and Strange, which gets absolutely eviscerated because it's very clear that there are sections that are just solely filmed only for sound, and then the rest is basically a silent movie. This was typical of the era because a lot of studios freaked the hell out, naturally, because we're used to making silent films. This is what the art form is. And now all of a sudden, Jack Warner and Sam Warner actually decided that he wanted to innovate with sound. Unfortunately, that project ended up killing him. Not directly. He had an abscess and there was no penicillin at the time. So, but he died. just before The Jazz Singer was released, and as a result basically changed the industry. But Warner's changes the entire game, and now everybody's having to adapt, and that includes British cinema. So even as Hitchcock defined British cinema not too long before with The Lodger, now he's got to redefine it again. And it's safe to say that, like anything, when you're transitioning technologies, everybody has their little bumps in the road. I will say that Murder and Blackmail, which are films that, fingers crossed, we're going to get an episode on before the end of it, because the guest that I had scheduled, I don't know his current situation with COVID and ability to record. So if not, we'll figure out a way to do it. But Murder and Blackmail, and also Murder's German version, which is also directed by Hitchcock, and it's called Mary for the German title. Those are films where he's able to do some tricks with sound. Oh, I'm sorry, Blackmail comes out before Murder. But they're able to use tricks with sound in order to up the ante on the suspense game for Hitchcock. So basically, when he makes Blackmail and the Murder, he's already on his way to doing things correctly, but there's still an adjustment period. And that comes with a film like No.17. No.17, obviously directed by you know who, from a screenplay by Alfred Hitchcock, Alma Revel, and Rodney Ackland, based on the play. The film stars Jon Stewart, Anne Gray, Leon M. Lyon, Donald Calthrop, Barry Jones, and Ann Casson. And cinematography by Jack Cox and Brian Langley, and edited by A.C. Hammond. I bring up these two specifically because when you watch a film like No.17, what amazes me every time I watch it is that for all that doesn't make sense in the movie, it's pretty incredible how the film is directed and edited to connote energy and speed. This movie operates on the same editing structure as an action film, or even a intense horror film that we might see today. Like the biggest thought that was running through my head through some of the fast editing was a Rob Zombie movie or a Saw movie. Obviously not to the extent of the shaky things that both of those filmmakers or films do when it comes to like connoting intense speed or speeding up somebody in a trap. But there are moments in this film where they are knocking each other around. People are falling through walls, falling through ceilings, and just everything is at a quick pace. And it shows because this movie is only 64 minutes. And yet a lot happens. Not all of it making sense.
The cutting style is very caustic in different aspects of it. And it is interesting to me to see where the how imbalanced it is. That I feel like when there's dialogue scenes and there isn't anything that Hitchcock is trying to elevate with the visuals, it's shot just like a stage play, and it's very simply shot, and the cutting is extremely slow.
Yep.
And you've got a lot of characters typically filling the frame at the same time, just sort of like, spilling their dialogue.
Yep. And
then when something is going to happen or is about to happen or is happening, it gets very, very caustic.
Yeah.
And I found it so fascinating to feel, or to find that of the three, this was by far the shortest.
Yeah.
Excuse me, 64 minutes, 63 minutes, something like that, you said? Right?
64 to 65, something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and it feels like it's 3.5 hours long. And I really do feel that part of what is to blame is that imbalance of the cutting, is that it will get super fast, but it's coming so incredibly out of nowhere that it shocks your brain.
Yeah.
And then it will lull back into exposition and the dialogue through the story, and it just draws on and on and on and on, and then a bunch will happen really fast, and then it will draw on and on and on and on, and so it does make it feel like, as you said, a lot is happening really quickly. But the imbalance makes it feel like the movie's a lot longer than it is to a negative, I would say.
Yeah. And so a bit of background before we jump into this plot here. We're talking about this caustic editing, a lot of stuff. So we should go back to this basic fact about number 17. And I'm going to let Alfred Hitchcock tell you in one simple sentence why this film might not be completely great. Well, the story sucks, and I don't want to fucking do it. Because this is a film he didn't want to make. He wanted to do an adaptation of the John Van Druten play London Wall, but the financial failure of Rich and Strange, or East of Shanghai as it is also known, John Maxwell took him off of London Wall and put him on this movie instead. And he has referred to it as a terrible picture and a very cheap melodrama. Now, having said that, though, Hitchcock's not one to skimp. And that's something we're going to find in all of these films. He doesn't skimp on... He will put effort into things. Like, this is not about a lack of effort. Like, I don't think anybody is... would ever claim that there's a lack of dedication to the craft. But it is very clear that even he can't save the story itself. And, this is also co-written by Alma Revel. And, I think this is a case where they both have to do the best they can, along with Rodney Ackland, just trying to make sense of the story that, from all indications, seems like it didn't even make sense on the stage, and that it was just like it's a one-setting place for the most part in this film until we get outside to the train at the end.
Yes, which is very clearly a contrivance for the film, because the entire second half of the film would have been next to impossible to do on a stage play.
Yeah.
And I tried to track down a synopsis of the stage play to figure out sort of, what was changed, or if it was changed, or if I am even accurate about guessing that the train had nothing to do with the stage play. And I couldn't find anything. But yeah, I mean, as far as the putting the effort towards it, I think that there's, this movie was assigned to Hitchcock. And so there's almost a feeling of like trying to squeeze blood out of a turnip out of spite, in terms of the effort and the attitude behind the way the effort is applied in this film.
He's doing his fucking best. That's the weird thing. Like, people have a fondness for this film. In the comments section on our Instagram page, when I posted a picture of number 17 a while back when I was rewatching it for the series, it was, people were admiring it, and it was like and it was almost like it's a guilty pleasure. So there's nothing like inherently wrong with liking this movie, but if we're breaking it down the way we do on the Shamley Silhouette, we're going to be talking about how the fact is that there's just not there's very little here outside of the obvious things you can pinpoint to Hitchcock's style, but there's no substance to the story we're discussing whatsoever.
Yeah, and as far as to speak to the efforts that you were talking about, there was a relationship that seems to have been broken by this film that I would love to dive deeper. But one of the directors of photography, Jack Cox, he had worked with almost consistently on every single film from 1927 until this film. Yeah. And then they stopped working together all the way until he did The Lady Vanishing, and that was the last time they ever worked together. Yeah. And that is, like, there's definitely a story behind that, right?
Yeah, there's got to be. There's not one that I found in any specific motif. I'd have to go back to a couple different books or Secret History of Hollywood to see if there's something very specific to it. The thing is that there's outside of the information that Hitchcock doesn't really like this film, there's not much else to it. But we'll just go ahead and jump right into this film, because there's a lot going on, but I don't think it's going to take us that long to get through it.
Well, yeah, before you jump in, I want to let you know I'm going to sit back for the beginning of it, because I'm curious to see where you start in how you even tell this story, aside from sitting someone down to watch this film for an hour.
Yeah, so let me be very clear, too, about how you describe number 17 out loud. And it's a problem that I've had with discussing silent films of Hitchcock's on the show in a way that is meaningful, because it's hard to tell on a podcast about something that's inherently visual. Like you're not going to do justice to the imagery. Like if something like The Lodger, like the thing with The Lodger we were able to discuss was breaking down the story when I talked with Jack Hanley on it, right? So in the case of number 17, there's two problems with this. One, this story is incomprehensible. And number two is that it's primarily visual, and as Marshall pointed out, when it is dialogue, it stays there, and there's very little happening there. Like there's like virtually nothing outside of the character twitches and stuff. Like there's virtually nothing. I mean, like we'll go ahead and jump right out. We open with a hat blowing down the wind, like in one of the most interesting shots in the movie. Like,
sorry, I just wanted to jump in there real quick, and I think that the difficulty about talking about the plot of this film is that everything that happens in this film is based on what this actual story is about, which happens before the film starts.
Yeah.
Which because you don't know about, all you're discovering, like the film is the process of discovering what has already happened.
Yeah.
So it's like the entire film is exposition to find out what set this film up so that you can be interested and involved with what is going on. And the film tries to strike that balance of keeping you engaged because you don't know what's going on, and you're going along the solving of this mystery along with the characters, but it is so inherently reliant on all of what has happened prior to the film has set up, and all the relationships and occurrences and everything like that it makes describing the film, one, difficult, two, impossible without any spoilers. In fact, I will confess to you that in my research for this, after watching it, I actually flagged one of the plot synopses on IMDb because not only did it give everything away in what I thought was a really bad way, but they misnamed the characters. So, if when you go to IMDb there is only one plot synopsis, you will have me to thank for the second one being taken down.
Yeah, here's the question that I have, Marshall.
Yeah.
Do you care if this is spoiled?
I mean,
to an extent, I do. Obviously,
the movie does. I as far as our podcast, no, but the movie really does, because it's like the second to last line of dialogue, for Christ's sake. So, but it's just it's you can't even be sly about it by saying, okay, so this guy walks into this house called number 17 and keep calling him the guy without giving up the spoiler, because it's not the film. Yeah. Like the only way to not give it away is to just watch the film. So I'll let you continue. I just kind of wanted to preface that with just, I was thinking about this part of our podcast and being like, how do you talk about what has happened here without constantly being like, okay, because see, here's what happened before the movie started, and here's what also happened before the movie started, and here's why this is interesting. And it's, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's fine. Before I do, I'll point out, based on how this is being described to the audience, because believe me, it's pretty much this. The only way this story would make sense is if you got Quentin Tarantino to write a 3-hour movie based on this play, and then he could do his narrative retooling and shifting of timelines in order to tell the story in an interesting way. Because as it's such, we're dropped into the action. Now, I normally like that in a movie, because I like to be kind of just thrust into things and then pick up stuff along the way if it's well written. When you throw somebody into a story without any context whatsoever, like zero context, and just basically spending roughly 35 of your 64 minutes explaining things, that's when it becomes very trying.
That's brilliant. That is a brilliant analogy, that this number 17 is Reservoir Dogs without any of the flashbacks.
Yeah, exactly.
It just is. If Reservoir Dogs started in the car and continued to the warehouse, and you never had any flashbacks, that is number 17.
Yeah,
that's perfect. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Bravo.
And that makes Ben, the Mr. Pink,
Yes.
But so we open up on this hat blowing down the street, and we have a young man. He calls himself Forsyth. And when we initially find out his name, or is it his name? You'll find out. This is a how many year old movie? We're past the point of spoiler alerts on this one. But he's arriving at a house that's marked for rent, and but it's open. So he goes in, and basically we're treated to the suspense that you find in a haunted house movie. This is a decrepit building. Like, this thing is falling apart. Building codes are, meaningless to this establishment here that we are dealing with. He approaches up the stairs, and as he's approaching up the stairs, a rather disheveled-looking hobo man played by Leon M. Lyon, he calls himself Ben, is ostensibly like wandering through the house and discovers a dead body on top of the staircase, and then they cross paths with each other, and they go into a routine about what is Ben doing here, and also what is Forsyth doing here, and they're trying to figure out why is there a dead body lying on the ground. That's kind of why I made also the Saw analogy, is just like it sets up that similar situation of like two people in a room, all of a sudden there's a dead body in the middle of the floor. They're trying to figure out what's going on. Difference between this and Saw is that this is early British cinema with sound, and we're talking about, we're giving each other basically origin stories, and from then on, for like a good 10 minutes, it's kind of just them wandering through the house and trying to figure out what's going on
amidst very elementary pratfalls and physical comedy.
Yeah.
And I use that. I'm being very generous with the word comedy there.
And this is like, and again, like when we have the conversations that are locked off, we have, a scene with Ben, like rifling through his own pockets to assure that he isn't the one who killed the man. And he goes like, well, this is a handkerchief. I strangled him with that, or this is string. I stabbed him with it,
I gagged him with it.
Or I gagged him with it, and then the sausage is what I beat him over the head with.
I beat him over the head with the sausage. I stabbed him with the string, and I gagged him with the handkerchief. Yeah. The
most interesting character trait that we have of Ben is that he pulls out a picture of a kid, and Forsyth grabs it, and then he's like, no, not that. And you find out that he had a kid that died, and I'm like, oh, well, this is interesting. Like, this is a character. Like, this is something going on, and the guy Forsyth, he's played by Jon Stewart. No, not that Jon Stewart. John Stuart, who was an actor with Hitchcock for 3 films in the early years, starting with The Pleasure Garden. So he's been around the Hitchcock camp and seen him grow over the years.
Yeah, so, fun piece of trivia, the film he did immediately after this, was called Men of Steel. And then many, many years later, in 1978, he would be the 10th Kryptonian Elder in Dick Donner's Superman.
Oh, that's how you know Donner cared.
Yes. And the guy had 228 acting credits at the time of his death.
Yeah. And he worked the gamut. He was in Flying Fortress and the Big Blockade. Like, this is a guy who ran around, especially through the Warriors too. So it's good to know that he has a legacy that caps off with Superman. That is his final role. That is in Village of the Damned too. He's in Village of the Damned. He's Professor Smith.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. So he's just he was an actor who was a legend within Britain's film community. Obviously, this is a film that he'll be remembered for only for the association with Hitchcock, because he's not doing anything particularly wonderful in the movie. He's our hero, so I guess he's actively doing things technically, but
yeah, but it's the character, from a writing standpoint, this is actually kind of an interesting study, is that the character of the character he's playing, I'll pretend like we're not going to give it away, only works linearly through the story.
Yeah.
Once you know who he is, nothing he does makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Once and especially when we get to the end, because when we find out what's going on at the end, then you're just like, well, okay, how did anything that you ended up going through make any sense or logical choice? Like, it's a shame because it when I first saw this film, I felt like it was incomplete because it was a bootleg, and this was back in college. I did not know enough research into it until I started doing this podcast on why it feels so skimpy. It's because there's just nothing to this story. There's just, if you listen to The Secret History of Hollywood, he talks about how essentially like there was nothing to begin with, so they had very little to work off of. So it's almost just like, well, we're basically adapting this straightforward. We're just going to have to make this visually interesting. Yeah. So that already puts you in a corner, and we've talked about Hitchcock in a corner before, but this is early on in his career. So he's already having to like come up with solutions to problems. And then sometimes, like in the cases of like plays adapted into films, there are times when the film supersedes the play, whether it's The Petrified Forest or even if you're going into novels. Like, I mean, I like the book No Country for Old Men. I think the film takes it to a different level. So essentially, you're doing good with whatever you have access to. When we get to those pratfalls, though, when they're not talking, they're antiquated, and obviously they're still stuck in the root of what you do in silent cinema, where it's physical acting. We're not needing any sound other than like if this was a silent film, there'd be dialogue cards within all this, and this would be primarily what you'd be seeing. You wouldn't even see the slowdown for any form of explanation whatsoever.
Well, you also have an issue of most of the pratfalls are coming from the character of Ben from Leon M. Lyon,
who clearly has a problem.
Well, interestingly, he also produced the film.
Yep.
So I would be willing to bet that that was a thing that he thought he was particularly good at, and asked for that to be significantly amped up. A nice little bit of tidbit is Hitchcock described him as an awful old man. So clearly they got along great during this production.
Oh yeah, yeah, and he didn't like. I think it boils down to like if you've got to be stuck in this situation, you tend to make do with what you have and get along with the people you're working with if you've got to go through this, because again, this is something he doesn't want to do. So he's nudged into this, like it's, and part of like the whole being assigned to a picture back in this era of filmmaking in general. It's not just Hollywood. This is done through British. This is done through British International Pictures. So this is not even the Gameau decision making at hand, and this is before he goes back to British Gameau in Gainsborough and makes some of the classics that we know today that get Criterion releases. But he's assigned to this thing. He would get assigned to things. There's a period after The Lodger, before the 39 Steps, or even Sabotage too, where it'd be before the 39 Steps, you basically have him being assigned to melodramas that he ends up making interesting. So it's not like whether it's Downhill or The Manx Man and stuff like that, he is basically having to visually up the ante on films that are otherwise, if you put it in any other director's hands, it's not going to be interesting or memorable in any stretch of the imagination. So this is another case of I've got to elevate shit, or at the very least, I've got to elevate something that people seem to like, but why is the question? And
that's fair.
But I will say, amongst my favorite things coming up in this film, as they're searching through the house, they are walking around. There's a lot of great use of shadows in this movie, and they're just isolated moments. But there's clearly Hitchcock using things that he had used previously in The Lodger and other films like Blackmail and Murder, where he's able to create a dark and gritty atmosphere amidst this frivolous melodrama. So he's basically making a haunted house movie to a certain respect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very, very horrific in its presentation.
Yeah, and a lot of this can stem back to his influences from people like Fritz Lang and Paul Lenny, who really shaped cinema in Germany with their forms of German expressionism. So he's still using those tricks, and the camera placement and the shot composition is intentional within the style of how Hitchcock would storyboard things out. So there's a construction to this film. It just feels like, much like an IKEA, there are pieces missing that you will take forever to find, or if at all find them. So, but one of my favorite things that comes up is that as they're looking through, they look up and something crashes through the roof, and it's a woman. So, which she's revealed to be Miss Aykroyd, played by Anne Casson, and she's crying out for her dad. She lives in this place. How'd she fall through that fucking roof?
I mean, yeah. The
How do you not know the outlay of your own damn house?
and Anne Casson are utterly delightful. There's a scene coming up where there's just this. Oh, I fainted.
Yeah,
that is so delightful, and she's very, very charming. But, yeah, she crashes through the roof. That is her grand entrance into this film.
Yeah,
and she has, and it is. I almost kind of feel like the reason that she needed such a grand entrance is because she is so utterly crapped upon as her exit of the film.
Yeah. Oh, she's virtually unheard of during the climax. Like she's nowhere.
Yeah,
but,
she's forgotten.
Yeah, she's exactly. You're setting her up. It seems like she's being set up to be the love interest, but then it's just kind of like, no, we're not. No, not today. Like, but. That again, that would probably stem out to the play where there's something there that we're not seeing, but but she goes into an explanation that her father was on the roof and that they were in number 15, and they read a telegram that basically talks about people coming to meet up to get a diamond necklace at number 17. And so that's basically what ends up happening after midnight hits. Things are going around, and the body disappears all of a sudden. So that dead body is gone now. The problem with explaining how everything happens in between is because the editing is so choppy. Like, it's unclear how things form linearly.
Yeah. So I just, if I may, sort of like take a stab at the next like 15 minutes, because it is like I had to kind of I had to do some actual like physical mental work. My brain was physically churning in my head to try to figure out what did I just watch and what just happened.
Yeah.
So Jon Stewart's character shows up at this house, runs into Ben, who is this disheveled homeless person.
Yep.
And a dead body.
Yep.
And then after searching the dead body and finding some things, then Rose Aykroyd crashes through the roof.
Yep.
And she has a telegram that says, is that what says that something at 12:30 is going to happen?
Yeah,
that
half past midnight, yeah.
Okay, so they decide we need to leave the house before this thing happens, but then the bell chimes, and they think it's only midnight, but it turns out, no, it's actually 12:30.
Yeah.
And then the doorbell rings, and they go downstairs, and at the door is a man with a woman, and then as they're coming in, another man comes along with them.
Yep. Yep, and I will describe the three characters because they are technically important. Mr. Aykroyd, played by Henry Kane, Nora, who is a deaf and mute woman, played by Anne Gray, and a third person. And this third person will turn out to be very important because we can't reveal his name yet because it's technically a twist.
No, I believe you are incorrect. Actually, it's not. This is the problem with this film.
Yeah.
Is not only is it super confusing, but everyone looks the same.
Yeah.
In the film, but it's not. it's not Aykroyd who shows up, it's Brandt. It's Nora Brandt and
yes,
Henry Doyle.
that's right. Yes. So we have Brandt, Mrs. Brandt, and Doyle, who's the spoiler that he's the spoiler in this film until he's not.
Until he's not.
Yeah. But they meet up at the house, and
but they don't know each other.
no, they don't. They don't know each
Brandt
other.
shows up with Mrs. Brandt, who he introduces as a deaf mute.
Yep.
And then this third person shows up, who very obviously is lying about them being related.
Yeah. And it's even unclear why either of them would be even remotely important. Like, well, granted, nobody's important in this movie.
Right. And just like the writing is so on the wall that everyone is lying.
Yeah.
That is walking in, but then they continue along the pretenses that they're there to tour the house because it's up for sale.
Yeah. And then
yeah.
I was going to say we'll jump into it as they're being discovered, as everything's kind of unwinding. There's a point where Ben gets out a gun, and he accidentally shoots one of them, and they get searched, and Ben is just tossed into the bathroom.
Yeah, Ben's locked in the bathroom.
And Sheldrake,
surprise,
there's
another person in the bathroom.
Yeah, exactly. Sheldrake, played by Gary Marsh, chokes him, quote unquote, and Ben falls to the ground, but he pretends to basically be dead. And we see Sheldrake, this other cog in the wheel, getting the diamond necklace. So, and through the telegram, the heist has become clear. He's clearly a part of it. Where was he this whole time? Like
in the bathroom.
Yeah, because he's.
No, he wasn't, because we get noises of someone else creeping around the house earlier.
That's true. Yeah, that's true, because we had other figures earlier on in the movie. Again, this movie is all over the fucking place. And it's not until the 40-minute mark that things remotely make sense. But they the people tie up Forsyth and Miss Aykroyd, and so that they can get through with the job. Sheldrake comes out of the bathroom and is accosted by one of the associates, and just they duke it out in a scene that it's one of my favorite moments in the movie, because it's just fighting happening, because something's happening.
And also, I wish that I had seen this movie prior to going to film school, because I would have used it as an example for everyone complaining about the fighting cinematography in the Bourne films. So just say, they got it from Hitchcock.
Yeah,
because I'm not even kidding.
Yeah,
it looks handheld. Yeah, like, I mean, I don't think it is, because I don't think you could handhold the cameras back then.
No,
but it's that jumbled, and the cutting is so rapid you can't tell what the hell is going on.
And all the sound effects are clearly Foley. Yeah, so it's very much like a situation where, well, if I can get mobile, we put stuff in the soundtrack later, but I don't find it I don't find the Bourne fights distracting so much as just I get a bit of a headache. This comes very close to giving me one, because it is it's chop chop chop. It's the montage that Hitchcock is in love with. But I think that it doesn't really make sense to have this in here, other than the fact that it's something I can do to fill the time during this dismal story.
Yeah, you will hear, if you ever listen to interviews with stunt coordinators, one of the things that they talk about a lot when doing coordinating for fight scenes is finding the story in the fight and the emotion and the character arcs throughout it. And the problem in No.17 is you don't know anything about these people that are fighting or care about them, because they literally just got introduced on screen, and then have a 3-minute fight scene that feels like it's a 19-minute fight scene.
Yeah. And as we go through this fight scene, it's revealed that Sheldrake is the corpse from earlier. So he
Nope.
No,
you got that wrong too. This is so confusing. Sheldrake is who put the corpse there.
Sheldrake is Sheldrake is the one who put the corpse there.
Because the corpse is Rose Ackroyd's dad.
That's right. It's Rose Ackroyd. It's Mr. Ackroyd. Yeah, but they get untied by who?
They get untied by Mr. Ackroyd.
Yeah,
Mr.
Mr. Ackroyd.
Sheldrake that was in the bathroom.
Yeah, exactly. So everybody basically reveals themselves to be who they are, and the story starts. Which is getting these jewels across country lines from Britain to Germany.
By riding a train to a ferry.
Yeah.
Because it's going to take them to Germany, and that's the second half of the film.
Yeah, and you know that your movie is in trouble when the smartest thing in the movie is the side of a train that says train to ferry from Britain to Germany, because it finally explains something.
Yeah.
And we should say, like, amidst all the confusion that's going on with whatever this story is, where you can't make any sense of it, there's visual things going on. The fight in the bathroom is very Hitchcockian. Or the strangulation prior to it is very Hitchcockian, the way it's composed and framed and structured. You have a point of view with it, but those are moments in a movie, and you can't just have it comprised of only moments. It has to fit into the larger frame of the film itself, and I just don't feel like it does it here.
Right. Well, it's now that we're caught up, all for our poor audience who has not seen this film and is like just bleeding out their ears trying to keep up with the story.
Yeah.
Here's what happened. There was a jewel heist and a necklace was stolen.
Yeah.
And there were the people that were involved in this heist were a man named Brandt and his wife, a man named Mr. Ackroyd and his daughter, a Henry Doyle and a Sheldrake. Yeah. And much like Reservoir Dogs, none of them, except for the couple and the father and daughter, knew each other or had any history together. They all stole this thing, and I don't know if maybe there's another character that we don't know that took this necklace to the house, or why they're all deciding to meet up there.
It's Mr. Blonde. Didn't you know it was Mr. Blonde the whole time? You can't see Michael Madsen in the movie, but he was a part of the movie.
Of course.
Because he's been around forever.
So they're all supposed to meet up at this house where they're going to, like, collectively, I guess, take the necklace to the train. Yeah. To get it to where it needs to go. Yeah, to smuggle it out. You can't break up a necklace and split it however many people are involved that many ways. Yeah. And what happens is, prior to at the time that everyone's supposed to meet, Rose Ackroyd receives a telegram from somebody else that we never see, alerting her father that a detective is onto them. Yeah. So Mr. Ackroyd, after receiving that message, decides that he's going to go to where they're supposed to meet, and I'm guessing get the necklace and take it for himself before the detective can go. But this other guy, Sheldrake, has had the same idea and catches him and smacks him over the head. Yeah. And therefore, Ackroyd becomes the dead body. Yeah. And I'm assuming that happens just as Ben shows up, who's this homeless person looking to squat in this house. And that scares Sheldrake into hiding. Yeah. And then as Ben goes upstairs, this other character, Jon Stewart's character, shows up. The man with the blowing hat shows up. Yeah. And that's when the movie starts. So that's the multitude of things that are in play before this hat blows across the sidewalk. And so what you are watching are all of these characters that are somehow all involved in the same plot, but still don't seem to know each other. Yeah. Or like each other, or actually be in cahoots in any way, shape, or form, carry out this narrative.
You know, I'm wondering if it's like Cloud Atlas, where everything's just connected tangentially through time and history, because that seems like the only way you would be able to understand everything going on in this movie.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess that's why we spend the last 40% on a model train, is because at the end of the day, we're all just stuck on a train track moving ever towards our splash into the into the water. So what has come before and what is going on now matters not.
Yeah.
The arrangement of the train cars do not matter, because ultimately we will all be rubble at the bottom of the sea.
Yeah, exactly. But so when they're tied up again, after being tied up previously, Nora, the deaf and mute girl, says, "Don't worry, I'll be back." So clearly she's been lying. So now we throw a whole other character trait into this.
Mm-hmm.
Her betrayal is completely unclear. She's not really... She's just turning on him, going like, "I don't want to go through with this." Like, maybe she's just had second thoughts about this entire heist, and was just playing a game to, get these jewels out. But it's unclear. Anytime they try to explain it, it's still unclear. So we're basically just kind of left to watch it visually play out. If you turn the sound off on this movie, it would make just as much sense.
Yeah, actually, I will say that as hard of a time as I'm giving the film, the one thing that I really was lamenting while I was watching it was having to see this in below SD quality, as some bootleg rip that I found on some streaming site. That I wonder how much more clear who people were and what the geography of the scenes were and what they were doing would have been if I would have been able to actually make out who they were, and they weren't all just these sort of like amorphous blobs.
You know what's funny? You bring that up about being amorphous. The characterization of these characters, which I don't blame Alma Revel, Hitchcock, or Ackland when it comes to this script, because they're clearly working off of a stage play where things are established, but these characterizations blend so much that when they're being tied up and our detective friend is basically being told to put his hands behind his back so he can be tied up, this guy pulls out a gun and says, "Please." So it's all very polite British criminals who rarely get into a tussle up until the third act. Mm-hmm. They're literally just talking out the issues. And going back to the Reservoir Dogs of it all, the difference between this and a Reservoir Dogs is in Reservoir Dogs, when they're talking, it has something to do with what's going on. Or it has characterization, or it has an emotion behind it. And I don't feel like any of them are giving any emotion outside of Ben. Like, Ben's the only character.
Because they are literally, as you end up finding out at the end, all playing the exact same thing.
Yeah.
In terms of like from an acting standpoint of like what's my motivation, what's the subtext. They're all pretending to be someone they're not, or pretending to be doing something they're not doing, except for Ben.
Because he's genuine.
Yeah, because he's genuine.
Yeah.
And so because they're all playing the same thing, it really robs the actors in a certain manner the ability to differentiate themselves from one another.
Yeah.
And from a casting standpoint, when you cast two pale, dark-haired women in a movie, you can't tell who's who in some scenes, especially when it's lit in this very, low-key, horror haunted house way, and there's a lot of shadow and a lot of, the key lights are almost overexposed. It's really hard to tell who is who. And then everyone else in the film, except for Ben, because he's so clearly this disheveled homeless person, is like they're all dressed exactly the same, and they're all, old white men. And so it's really difficult to tell who's doing what and who wants what and who's trying to achieve what.
Two of them have mustaches that are similar, and it's hard to just if it weren't for the fact that one is clearly larger and one is clearly smaller, I would not tell these two apart. Like, that is literally it is an example of, like, you were talking about motivation. The motivation is read the line. That's pretty much all that's happening. And again, it stems into, like, this is something that clearly just it's an assignment and it's going to be done. You can tell when a film from the golden age of Hollywood or early cinema in general is an assignment by the way people are acting on set and by the way it's directed. And you can tell that direction whether somebody's trying to go for an ambitious shot or if they're literally just sticking the camera there. It's the difference between, like, I mean, the only director that I know in the history of film entirely who gets away with just sticking the camera in front of people and doing it correctly is Kevin Smith, because at least he has something interesting going on there. He could literally have a walked off one shot. Something interesting's happening because those two characters are talking about many different vulgar things that don't need to be mentioned on this show.
Right. Well, and Smith is telling this very, who the characters are and what they're talking about.
Yeah.
If he was trying to be fancy with the camera, it would ruin the film.
Yeah.
No one would believe it. You'd stop caring about these characters. You'd be like, stop that. You don't need that.
It'd be distracting because
Yeah, it fits. I mean, I think that, another way to look at it with number 17 is nothing of any consequence happens in the film. A character, our main character, in fact, is literally shot, and it looks like this. I think that Richard Donner in Superman stole the scene where the mugger goes to shoot Lois Lane and Clark Kent catches the bullet. It looks like I was watching a Superman film that he reached out and grabbed the bullet from hitting one of the women. I couldn't tell you who it was at this point.
Yeah.
But and then you end up finding out that, like, maybe he was shot in the wrist, but they wrap a handkerchief around it, and that is the last you hear of it.
Yeah. It's not mentioned. Like, it's not even like a motivation for anger for him to be even more motivated to do something. Like, it does nothing. Anything that happens doesn't matter. It's
there's a giant train crash. Everyone survives.
Yeah, exactly. But here's the thing we will get to, though, in this is that when we get into the train, even as things are still not happening that matter, we see the beginnings or the early goings on of what would become a very famous Hitchcock trope, which is action on trains or train sequences in general. And this one in particular, with the utilization of stock footage and models, it looks pretty cool. Like, it doesn't look. When you talk about a film of this early era, it's hard to say like things look genuine or real, but I believe the models that he's utilizing combined with the footage that he's shooting to create that sequence. Like it.
Yeah. I'll say the very humbling thing to me about this film, and to a degree also, I made a similar note with the next film we'll talk about, Waltzes from Vienna, is that this film reminded me just through and through of a student film.
Yeah.
In all levels of what this film is doing, of the just like really droll dialogue with, I'm going to get super stylistic with the lighting and the camera angle, but not really have anything much to say. Mm-hmm. I'm going to have this action scene with no stunt coordination that's just going to like kind of go on too long because I want to have a fight. I'm going to have characters show up out of nowhere and no consequence to anything.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to be just barely over ambitious with my special effects, like putting a model train on a train track and trying to film it in a way that is exciting and that's actionable, and then try to cover it up with stock sound effects.
Yeah.
And take the same little loop of a train noise and just loop it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So every 4 seconds you hear the exact same like tick in the audio.
Yeah.
This movie so much so reminded me of a student film. And I think that, again, the humbling aspect of that is like, for me, it was like, oh, this is why, if you're a creative person and a filmmaker in particular, is like, this is why you need to make movies at every chance that you can.
Yeah.
Because this is Hitchcock, like the same guy who made Psycho, who made The Birds, who made Vertigo, who made North by Northwest, made No.17. And those movies that I just mentioned would not have been possible if he had not made No.17. I wholeheartedly believe that.
Yeah, and when we talk about, I think I firmly believe when we talk about, I think this extends primarily to people who judge early Hollywood and early films in history with a sharp eye of going like, oh well, it's boring, it's stilted, and nothing happens. It's like, yeah, because the craft was learning. Like it's by the time No.17 comes out, the industry of film is like barely 40 years old. Is literally just beginning to move its legs around. And with the advent of sound, you have a whole other element into the mix that you didn't even realize. It's like trying to still learn how to run your life while realizing the midlife crisis is on the way over. You know, like you've got to balance 500 things in your head. Then in the case of this train sequence in particular, you know, prior to that, like sequences of that nature combined with sound were pretty rare. So you have a filmmaker who's trying out something he hasn't tried out before that he clearly is fascinated by, and then would repeat and go like, okay, I've got The Lady Vanishes in front of me. Well, I did something like this in No.17. What if I can stretch out things happening on a train to an entire film, and how can I make that fascinating? Or I would put it up to Foreign Correspondent. You know, you have a wonderfully extravagant climax that takes place on a plane crashing. And that stuff doesn't happen until you have something like No.17 to suggest, I've got this big set piece. What can I do with it? Okay, it didn't quite work this time, but the idea is there. It's, you know, there's a lot of shit gets thrown Michael Bay's way, and I'm guilty of it as well. You cannot say that Michael Bay is not an innovative director in his own right. There are things he does in the Transformers movies that I do not like by any stretch, that then find themselves placed firmly in later films that have some form of merit. Like,
I mean, I'm minus the misogyny. I'm a Michael Bay apologist. I mean, Michael Bay single-handedly changed the modern action film. Like, the modern action film can write a thank you letter to one person, and his name is Michael Bay.
And I'm sure he lovingly tosses that note in the garbage. but it's true. Like, and if we're gonna bring it into Hitchcock's world, you know, like he sets up the possibility of what can happen. You know, obviously Hollywood, when he's in Britain making these films, Hollywood's doing extravagant things all across the board. Regardless of the restriction of sound, they're still finding a way to do extravagant things, whether it's musicals that are locked off, but you have this immense choreography by choreographers ranging from the gamut of Broadway's highest talent. And with Hitchcock, he's setting up these big spectacle set pieces. It's clear what kind of filmmaker Hitchcock wants to be. He wants to be a filmmaker that Hollywood could then grab and pick up and take over to Hollywood. But so with this climax, you know, amongst all the other character things happening, Doyle claims to be Barton, the detective. It goes nowhere because they all fight on the train and nothing happens.
There's no actual. Yeah, I guess like that's the thing is like even after having watched the film and being able to piece together what happened before the film started, I still don't understand what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
Because it's like if the goal was to all meet up at this house where maybe one of them is bringing the necklace or where someone else has brought the necklace, again, unclear. Regardless, if the plan is to all meet up and collectively take this necklace to the train, to the ferry, then who cares who has the necklace if that's the plan? So this fighting over the necklace makes exactly no sense amongst any of the thieves.
Yeah.
It utterly doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. And you know, this train crashes into the ocean in a spectacular fashion with the combination of all the different miniatures and models that he's using to create that spectacle. They're all pulled out of the water. Doyle is still going along with the fact that he's Detective Barton, except the actual Detective Barton, who is Jon Stewart, reveals his card and so Doyle's gonna be arrested for everything. Nothing really happens to Nora, and the last shot of the film is Ben with the diamonds because he got it at some point.
Yeah. Well, yeah, nothing happens to Nora, nor to Rose Aykroyd, nor to her father.
No, they're forgotten. Didn't you forget they're nothing?
Yeah, utterly forgotten.
Yeah,
it's wild. It is. Yeah. It's something else.
It's number 17. I think can be dialed down to, or broken down to a simple thing, and this is just, this is from the Hitchcock Truffaut book. He called it a disaster. And it's what it is. When we talk about a disaster in the terms of film today, I'd venture that there are few that can claim to be completely incomprehensible. I wouldn't say that you can't follow number 17. I would just say that you can follow it even though it doesn't make sense because it's just 64 minutes and you're in and you're out. Like, it's not asking, it's not a commitment. It's not like Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy, where you're being asked to follow 500 plot lines that don't always come out to anything. Although I love that movie, not everything in it is functioning at a rate that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, I think that number 17 fails because it's a 35-minute movie that's stretched into a longer one, a twice as long film. You could cut this down and make it Alfred Hitchcock Presents. It's a one-act play.
Yeah,
is what it is. It's a one-act play in which I don't know if someone was selling a toy train or something like that, but was like, well, we can pad this runtime by quite a bit if we just throw a camera around on a train track for a little while.
I got a contract from a place called Tyco, and they really want their train in my movie. So what can I do? Well, this didn't work out, but I do like trains. What can I do with that? No, nothing comes. The
thing that kept going through my head as I was watching it was the Monty Python, just it's only a model.
Yeah.
Why is everyone so panicky? It's only a model.
Yeah. And Truffaut responded to it. He said he found it funny, but the story was rather confusing. So it's not just us, guys. Francois Truffaut couldn't follow this fucking thing.
Yeah. Reading through the interview pieces in the Hitchcock Truffaut book about all the films that we watched.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to me how Hitchcock's response to the questions was basically acknowledging that Truffaut had asked a question, and then he just started talking about one of his modern films.
Yeah.
Essentially, I do not want to talk about these things. I don't care about these old films. Let me just tell you about this thing that happened in North by Northwest.
If Hitchcock doesn't acknowledge it as a Hitchcock film, he won't discuss it. Any type of research that I've been able to do with what resources I have leads me to just, this is something he did because he had to do it, or it's something that didn't work out in his favor. He doesn't talk a lot about Dial M for Murder in Hitchcock Truffaut that much at all. So
not that much.
And the same goes with a couple of other films in his oeuvre that I'd love for him to have discussed more. But the bottom line is that this, if it caused him pain or frustrated him, he's not going to talk about it. He will not suffer those films lightly. And this film is basically just people were confused and rather just put off by it. And it's one of those Hitchcock films that has a very low rating on Rotten Tomatoes. So even from a modern context, people still find this film to be rather pedestrian and and there's lots of different of the time cliches. There's an attempt at being a comedy thriller that doesn't quite work, but the saving grace of it is these train sequences and the further evolution of shot composition and different suspense techniques that he would perfect down the line. like I was alluding to earlier, the bottom line is that this felt like a modern. There's a speed to this film that suggests what a modern horror movie ends up doing today. And I'm not talking about a horror film like some of the more eloquent ones that we've been receiving, but they're films that I enjoy. But like films like Saw or House of a Thousand Corpses, where things are moving at a kinetic speed that is so rapid that just like the story's kind of irrelevant. You're just watching the things that are happening in it. The difference is that stuff happens in a Saw movie and a House of a Thousand Corpses movie, but nothing's really happening here. So
right.
It,
yeah, there's an interesting aspect of the cinematography. Speaking of the visuals, that is, was sort of an interesting thing to experience. You know, coming from a Hitchcock film, early Hitchcock film. You know, giving it benefit of the doubt where it's due, is that there are individual shots, especially in the opening sequence. Opening 20-25 minutes in that take place in the house, where that the shots themselves are fantastic and they're amazing and wonderfully composed and phenomenally lit, but nothing is consistent from shot to shot to shot, and it's actually really hard to keep track of not necessarily the geography of where people are, but of who can see what, and what is hidden and what is not hidden and what is seen and what is not seen. I mean, the opening shot with who ends up being Barton coming up the stairs, and Ben is at the top of the stairs where he's discovering the dead body. You have Ben looking over the banister, looking down, and then a shot to Barton looking up, and they can't see each other.
Yeah.
As you end up coming to find that they're both staring at each other and they're both perfectly lit, and they cannot see each other.
Yep.
But then later on, there's faint shadows in the background that they both turn and react to, and there's inconsistency as a whole.
Yeah.
Individual pieces in that sequence, they're gorgeous shots.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah.
And I was gonna say that there within that, you know, like as you were saying, eye lines mean nothing in this movie, but also there's compositions of this film, and we talked earlier about silent film going into sound film. There are portions of this film where the close-ups on people only work for silent film, and I refer directly to moments specifically with Ben, where there is nothing in the background. It is just his face, and the only time that those close-ups work in sound movies is when you have like a distinctive stylistic design behind them, or if you're making a horror movie where there is supposed to be something in the back. But this is not trying to be really a horror movie. It's trying to be like a caper of sorts, or a light thriller. But they're not playing into that motif within the editing. There's a reaction shot of him where there's like just black around him, and it's just his close up. It's unclear what he's looking at, because then it quick cuts a bunch before something happens.
Yeah.
So
and the lighting and the facial expression is like it's near kabuki.
Yeah. And it feels like
over the topness.
Yeah, and it feels like this is something that came out of what The Lodger would have been. If this was a silent movie, it would make much more sense. Like, or at least you'd be able to follow things better. All you'd have to do is have dialogue or title cards and dialogue cards every so often, just to set up even a character or even just a line of dialogue that says this is what we're here to do. You don't need the filler that we have that doesn't explain anything. It's almost like the way you're describing the plot, and we've been talking about this plot, you could chalk it up to some dialogue cards that are just vague enough to work, and then just make it a silent movie where action is happening. If this was pure cinema, maybe it would be more enjoyable, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I think
and even that's stretching it, you know?
Yeah, I think if rather than being number 17, if this was number 8.5, it would be a tolerable film. You cut everything in half: the runtime, the cast, the amount of time spent on the train. Like, you just cut everything in half,
or find a way to explain things up at the top without having to drudge us through this house, wondering what's happening. It's one of those moments where I'm just like, I would like to see the bank robbery before they go to the hideout. You know, like it would help the story function a little bit, like the tiniest bit.
Well, you have, I mean, Zach, we've talked about you've started to do some work with sound design,
yeah,
and that sort of thing. So, coming at a film like this with that approach to say, okay, I'm going to take away your ability to do dialogue, to do sync sound.
Yeah.
And, thinking about what this film could be if, again, you cut this cast in half. And so you can even start out the same way. It's the exact same, story parameters.
Yeah.
But you have Barton arriving at the house with Ben there.
Yeah.
And another thing is this is a 3-story house and you only ever see 2 levels.
Mm-hmm.
Think about what an amazing experience and what an amazing feat it would be from a sound perspective.
Yeah.
To team these 2 unlikely people up, of this upstanding British person and this, homeless person.
Yeah.
And to watch them creeping around the house, needing to be quiet. So you take away your ability to even have dialogue, even if you did have sync sound.
Yeah.
And they hear people creeping around on different levels because someone is in the house with them and it's supposed to be kept.
Yeah.
And they come across a dead body or, discover the telegram, and that's part of, rather than using dialogue, we can just read the dialogue rather than having the daughter say, here's what the telegram says.
Yeah.
I think that it would be an interesting sort of exercise. You couldn't make a feature-length movie out of it. I don't, it doesn't need to be that long, but I think from that sound design perspective, from approaching it as a silent film, I think would actually be kind of an interesting experiment.
I think, well, and here's where I had problems with the sound, and my problems with it are ones that are coming strictly from a modern perspective, and I always have to keep in mind they are working with technology that they still don't know all the ins and outs of yet. Obviously, I would like more of a sound design around them creeping around the house. Now, if you had to take that out, that's why I would recommend it being strictly a silent movie and not having those dialogue scenes, and finding a way to fill what would have been those dialogue scenes with something of action going on that helps move the story along. Within silent film, you're able to do, the Chaplin's The Kid is about 53 minutes. So it's roughly 11-ish minutes less than No.17. But we see an entire story happen in The Kid, And we don't, and there's moments in this film where I'm like, for all the talking that they're doing, they could be doing different little investigations around the house to try to figure out what's going on. And through the purposes of what we would call mime acting or silent film acting, you could imply different clues that lead to what's going on, rather than having a convoluted Reservoir Dog-esque robbery plot and escape plan. But and I agree with you that if you take that stuff out, it would be interesting as an experiment. I'd actually like to take the film itself and just edit out those chunks and see if it makes any sense whatsoever. That would be fascinating.
Yeah. But,
again, it's one of those coulda, woulda, shouldas, and again, I can't always give it too much flack because it's a film that one, the director does not want to make it, and number 2, you're working with virtually nothing that is coming from the source of nothing. So obviously this is a situation where it's this is an assignment film. I'm just going to do with what I can.
Right. And again, looking at it from an inspiration or as an inspiration point and from a learning lesson standpoint of as a filmmaker or as a creative person, it's, I think that there's this other aspect. I think a lot of times people are like, oh, well, it's an early film, so he didn't know enough to make it better or to massage these things out. And I think that another interesting thing that is learned through experience is not just how to fix stuff or not just how to make stuff better, but to also learn when you just don't do it.
Yeah.
To when it's not worth it, to look at the material and say, this is not worth the blood, sweat, and tears that it's going to take to make this tolerable. So the right answer is to say no.
Yeah.
So it's the fact that he refuses to talk about the movie, and when he does, it's a disaster. But here's this really amazing story about the time I tried to have a whole scene involving cats in the running up the stairs.
Yeah.
Which, if you don't have the Hitchcock Truffaut book, go out and buy it right away.
Yeah. And there's also the audio excerpts of those interviews are available all on YouTube. Do those and the book. You don't need to watch that documentary on it. It's a very good ad for the book, but and with that note on the sound design, it's interesting rewatching this film and thinking about Universal horror films which are coming out around the same time. And if you watch Dracula and Frankenstein, those are two films as masterful as they are in their own rights. I mean, Frankenstein's obviously better than Dracula. I like them both. They're both great. They're wonderful. They've got wonderfully creepy people in them. But they also are devoid of sound design because they are still in the early processes of understanding how to tell these stories. A good example is that Todd Browning directs Dracula. It's a stage play. I love Todd Browning's Dracula, but it's a play. The most visually interesting things happen in Dracula's castle, and then we're whisked off to a drawing room drama. Yeah. Until the very end when they're back in the catacombs. And when things are happening, when people are approaching, they're still relying on the image itself and not the things you can do to enhance it. Right. And then this film, at times, is overdoing it, especially near the climax. Like, the train sequence, as good as it is full of sound design that, as you said earlier, is looping and repeating. And
it's a cacophony. It's
sensory overload.
Yeah, it actually, I will not lie, it put me to sleep. And not, I don't, like, yes, it's way too long, and yes, not a lot happens, and what happens is, like, not particularly interesting, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what put me to sleep was not that it was boring. It, like, literally, it was like being put on top of a washing machine in, like, a baby carrier. It just, like, the rhythmicness of the same effects being used over and over and over again.
Yeah.
With just, like, the wind going by, and every single car had its own type of sound design, but they kept revisiting the same train cars. Yeah. That it was this very weird drumming and or thrumming of the same sound, and it just conked me out. I saw the end of the film and then had to rewind it all the way back to when they were still in the house and watch it through again to be like, okay, what happened? Where did these people go?
Yeah. And did you find, Marshall, that it didn't matter? Because I
mean, my big thing at the end was like, oh no, like, what happened to Rose Aykroyd? Like, I really liked her. I thought she was super sweet. And then I got back to that point in the film and it kept going. I went, oh, she literally just disappears from the movie. Yep. Okay. So it's just like, nope, we're done. Goodbye.
Look, Marshall, I'm going to reveal it now. The bottom line is that Ann Casson had an offer to do a play entitled The Donkey Dance, and it was 10 times more interesting and fascinating than the movie that we made. So I just had to let her do it. I have no other reason other than this Donkey Dance, which is a masterpiece. If you haven't seen it, it's lost, but find it, and then you can see how it is 10 times better than number 17.
Hitch. We all know it's just because she had brown hair.
Yeah, too many brown-haired girls here. Not enough blondes. In fact, there's no blondes in this movie. Alma, why did I agree to make this? Oh, yeah, because I was assigned it, because this is the studio era. But I was going to say, I want to read the review that Variety wrote.
Oh, please.
Oh, so this is an excerpt from this review. And this is from August of 1932. Like the play, the story is vague, and despite its intended eeriness, unconvincing. It is asking a lot of an audience, even a picture one, to make them believe a woman accomplice of a band of thieves will fall in love at first sight with a detective and prevent his being done in by her associates. And then the review also stated that the train crash is very good, but not sufficient to make it anything but a program feature. So, ouch. But, yeah, that's what's there.
Yeah, I mean, harsh but fair.
Yeah, it's Variety conked it on the nose right there. So, this film is done, obviously, Hitchcock, right after this, he's given another assignment and this is 2 years. This film comes out 2 years after No.17, so there's a 2-year gap, and we're suddenly thrown into Hitchcock making a musical.
In quotes.
Yes, in quotes. This is this film is to explain what Waltzes from Vienna is. We should start by talking a little bit about the musical itself. It's based essentially on the creation of the Blue Danube,
Mm-hmm.
and
The fictionalized creation of it.
Yeah, the fictionalized creation of it. Like the full plot taking place in 1854, and about the rivalry between Father Strauss and son Strauss, of Johann Strauss specifically. This rivalry between them and how it forms the Blue Danube in order to prove that I'm worth more than you tell me I am, Daddy. It's daddy issues. It's a daddy issue movie, Marshall. We're going to talk about daddy issues today.
Rich white people daddy issues.
Rich white daddy issues. That's what I'm here for today. No, I didn't want to do this one either. It's that there was nothing else to do.
Yeah. So it was originally this operette.
Yep.
I think it was 1917. Is that my memory? I get that right. By Heinz Reichert.
Yep.
Ernest. I can't pronounce that.
Ernst Marischka. Ernst Marischka. Alfred Maria Wilner, and Heinz Reichert.
Yeah.
And it was arranged by Erich Wolfgang Korngold and Julius Bittner. And it was performed for the first time. This musical is performed for the first time in Vienna in October 1930. And there was an English adaptation of it called The Great Waltz that played on Broadway in 1954. And an English version that played in London in the 70s. So this musical is then handed off to British Gameau, and it's the only project that Hitchcock is able to be given. Essentially, there's a basic understanding that Hitchcock told Truffaut he only agreed to make it because he had no other film projects that year and he wanted to stay working, which goes back to what you were talking about of always find a way to just keep making films regardless of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you still work regardless. You know, don't do what I did and have a nervous breakdown and stop making movies, because then that just leads you to making podcasts and talking on Zoom. But but the result is Waltzes from Vienna, and it also has the title Strauss's Great Waltz as well.
Only in the U.S. for some reason.
Yeah. Well, it's don't get us started on title changes.
Yeah. Amen.
We can go off on a whole tangent there, but this is also this has a cyclical presence in the regards of British cinema, operetta films, and it's a musical genre associated with mainly German cinema, and it began in the late 1920s. But these operettas themselves, not related to film, stretch back to Viennese operettas in the 19th century. So there's some silent films that have stage operettas going on, but it wasn't until sound films that they were able to really capitalize on these types of films, obviously because you need sound to do music. And Melody of the Heart is a German film directed by Hans Schwartz. It's one of those first films to really do that genre. And Britain had its cycle of operetta films, and Waltzes from Vienna is one of them. Directed by me, I guess. Produced by Tom Arnold. No, not that Tom Arnold. He was a theatrical producer in the UK who worked on many different things, amongst other things, casting Ivor Novello from The Lodger as Henry V at Drury Lane in 1938. So clearly a man of the stage. Screenplay by Guy Bolton and Alma Reville, coming back here. Starring Esmond Knight, Jesse Matthews, Edmund Gwenn, and Faye Compton, along with a slew of other supporting characters. So when you agreed to first come on this podcast, also almost back a year ago now, when we were going to talk about Psycho, did you think we'd be talking about Hitchcock's only musical? Be honest with me.
I'm going to be honest with you and tell you I didn't know that Hitchcock had an only musical.
It's tough to imagine. It's one of those things you find out and you're like, oh, I've got to watch that. And the first time I watched it was when it was first made available on YouTube. So this is not even something that I like grew up with or anything. This is just something that you find and you watch. And it's not one that's on the bootleg sets that I've had. So it was a revelation to watch it, because not everything in the, like, much like everything we've been discussing, not everything is worthless in this movie. But
Yeah. And
it is.
And I do, like, I do think it is worth saying, if anyone out there hears musical and just like, no thanks, this is, for all intents and purposes, not a musical. It is a movie with, I think, 3 singing scenes in it. But it isn't like, the furthest stretch of the imagination, and like, there's no way it's just not a musical. I'm sorry, it's not. It's a movie. It's about music, and I think there are three scenes of singing in it. So we'll watch it as a way to see some early Hitchcock. For sure.
Yeah, exactly. And the one of the keys to this is that Hitchcock stripped a lot of the music out that was in the original musical and turned them instead into. He basically kind of really focuses on the Blue Danube itself, and in addition, he changed the ends of the story from the stage musical. In the musical, one of our the baker's daughter character that we'll talk about decides that her father's apprentice Leopold would make a more suitable husband, and then Shawnee's kind of just left off to the dust. We'll talk about these characters in a way that'll make sense, but I wanted to point that out because this is also another pointed example of how prior properties are changed in order to kind of make a more filmic ending or something that makes sense to a mass audience, because not everybody will have access to the theater, even back in the 30s in Britain. So, and it might be for the better in terms of just making the film watchable. I don't know, because this film's rather light and airy, and obviously has zero, like, virtually the suspense around this film lies in how will this love triangle be solved. That's the suspense.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, this film is, if I'm being kind, near insufferable.
Yep.
For the first half of the film. And I kept watching it because I was going to be on a podcast in which I had to keep talking about it.
And you regret every minute of it.
No, I really don't. There's a moment that happens towards the end, which I know we'll get to in the plot synopses. But I recognized in myself that I have not cared about anything that has gone on. I do not care about this debutante white aristocrat these issues. But I am honestly hanging on the edge of my seat about what is about to happen here. Yeah. And that's a master at work. And and again, whether it's he didn't have the skill know-how of being able to put the rest of the pieces in place around the story of the film, or whatever it is, or whether it was he didn't care or was just trying to work or didn't know enough to say no, I don't know, but I did recognize in myself that, like, no one else could have made me feel the way that I'm feeling right now at this point in the story. Yeah. Except for Hitchcock.
Yeah. He's not, I will say that, like, with the film, like, obviously this is Viennese aristocrats. Your relation to them in a modern context is not going to matter unless this musical was somehow the biggest thing ever. Like, it would have had to, if we were talking about somebody saying, I want to remake Waltzes from Vienna today, there must have been a revival that was as big, if not bigger than Hamilton, to justify that, because that's the only way that a story like this matters much, because it's about a kid who has a respectable father who has to make a choice between making music or having a steady life as a baker with a woman who cares for him. You know, and it's that age-old thing of art versus reality, and just like, you know, do you settle down or do you keep making your art or whatever? But the way it's told, I agree with you. I don't really care about their problems. And yet I really want to know how the Blue Danube's going to come out. I really want to know how that's going to happen.
Yeah, I want to know how this party is going to, like, come together.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a slew of characters that, like, it's not like anything. This is because this is a musical. This is also de facto a comedy, and the comedy is not up to the snuff today. Even considering the aging of everything, like there are comedies from back in this era that still work today. This isn't one of them.
Well, this is I will say there's this amazing disconnect between. In both this, to a small extent in No.17, but most obvious in Secret Agent, which we'll get to, but this huge disconnect between the dialogue being so tight and just like really funny and biting, and that just like that wonderful British sardonic clipping that is really amazing, and then all of the physical comedy being the most vaudevillian, like elementary, like this is beneath this work, let alone the director and Alma and like all of the people who are involved. It's like, it's just, this is stupid shit. And up against the, you know, the instances of tight dialogue and the really funny exchanges going on. It's a really weird contrast.
Marshall, you didn't even see the deleted scene where I had a trained seal being fed fish every time he tossed a ball with his nose. You know, that was going to be that was George Burns was going to have a cameo. That's right, I knew who he was. Yeah, you're right. No. It's vaudeville to a T, and I'm a guy who likes this stuff. You know that about me. And I'm sure the audience at this point knows it too. I will fall head over heels in love with some vaudevillian pratfalling. In the case of this film, I feel like it's many shots removed from the elegance of anything silly that could happen in Gilbert and Sullivan. You know, like it's not. There's no reason to really have it other than to create some fun little banter and whatnot. Yeah,
but it fills such a large part of the film. And again, I mean, talking about things that don't matter and have no consequence. The beginning of the film starts out with a building is on fire.
Yeah,
and two people are upstairs and don't know and don't care.
Yeah, which now from a 30s perspective, we're probably led to believe, hey, you know, we're in love, so it doesn't matter if a building's on fire. Today, we look at that and go, that building's on fire. Get the fuck out of the house.
Yes.
But like, and again, that's not to say we're smarter than a film of that era, but it does look strange, especially today. And I'm fairly sure it felt strange even then because you're sustaining that sequence for so long. Like, it lasts longer than it should. Mm-hmm. Like, it should start with them basically doing their banter. Meanwhile, the building's on fire. Then we cut to the ladder. But we have a lot of time wrapped around them talking about the formation of this song that he's writing. And meanwhile, the building is actively on fire.
Well, and it's also, you know, I was extremely fascinated to hear you say that in the original operette, our love interest ends up going with Leopold.
Yeah.
Because the film, the opening sequence is structured in that way. Like, I actually, at the first 10 minutes of the film, I didn't know who the protagonist was. And I don't know if you want to jump into cliff notes on the plot before we start talking about this, just to, you know, kind of talk about like what that sequence is about. But, you know, there's a fire in a building, fire brigade shows up. There's a couple upstairs. One is working on a piano. That is our Johann Strauss Jr.
Yeah.
and he's with
Shawnee.
his girlfriend, Rezi,
Yep.
and she is singing, and they're working on a thing, and from across the street from the bakery that you come to find her father owns and she also works at, comes Leopold.
Yeah.
And he comes up a ladder to rescue her.
Yeah.
And there's this tug of war over her in which Johann Strauss, or in which Leopold, in trying to get him to let go, says, she's not your property. And the response from our hero is, she will be. And so, yes, I have a much more modern disposition in looking at that, and I almost, threw up in reading that. But the guy, this lowly other baker, comes from across the street and makes his way up a ladder to save this woman.
Yeah.
And then ends up being kind of turned into a villain at the end of the film. And so I would be willing to place money on the fact that changed.
Yeah.
About the film if she ends up with Leopold in the operette.
Yeah. Well, and we this is a situation where we've talked about in the past where Hitchcock and the way women operate and function in his films isn't always, obviously to the higher standard. We've been fortunate to talk about ones where they have been treated very well, for the most part. But this is a film that I think this isn't at Hitchcock's hands. This is at the hands of just trends of the time.
Yeah, well, and I think that like the character of Rezi, played wonderfully by Jessie Matthews, is actually pretty good. She gets a little dense towards the end, I'll admit. But she's a very strong, confident woman. Yeah. And she tells her suitor like what she wants, and she's very strong-willed about it. And the movie positions her to be a little bit of a villain about that, but she's not treated as a total airhead, and she's not treated as a damsel in distress or anything like that. It's and these words ultimately came out of two people vying for her love, but just that particular verbiage of she's not your property, she will be. Yeah,
and that's
pretty
more what
shocking
I'm.
to me.
Yeah, and that's more what I'm referring to in the regard of just like this is definitely the 19th century and shit going around regarding like, well, you're my woman, so therefore property. And obviously Leopold has friend zone complex written all over him, whatever that fucking means. So like, we're obviously this is a trope of the period. This is not exclusive to this movie. This happens all across Golden Age Hollywood. This goes on into the fucking mid 2000s. So like, and beyond, it still happens today. So we're not talking about anything that's not unknown. But it's interesting because of Hitchcock being a director that, regardless of the debate, does create interesting female characters. To his own point, this is an odd piece in that certain respect in regards to how she is how people look at her according from the men's point of view, like it's a conquest or a prize. In 2 episodes ago, we talked with Matt Willix about Grace Kelly being dressed as such to function in tandem with Cary Grant, and by the end, she's in a gold dress, and it alludes to the idea of her being the prize at the end of the journey. And like, but that's done through visual cue and not through a story element that is blunt and in your face. Right. So that's what makes it pretty fascinating in that respect. And by the way, as we've been talking, there's still a fire going on in the building. And there is some really cool imagery that Hitchcock's able to get from an angle of the fire pump going. It leads to vaudevillian comedy, as you mentioned, but I like that angle and them just pumping it. That seems like something that he would have been able to do in silent film, of just hitting on those different angles to indicate that the fire is about to be put out without having to rely on like actually burning a building down.
Yeah, I mean, and the fire sequence did have the only visual gag that I actually really enjoyed about the film at all, and there's a point where they said, "Oh no, the fire has spread upstairs," and there's this huge puff of smoke that comes out of the upstairs window, and then the fire marshal comes to the edge of the window and he's puffing on a pipe, and he says, "The fire is out, it's done." And I was just like, oh, that's cute, that's clever. But there's a lot of just like flat out monkey business, trying to get up a ladder and trying to get down the ladder, and dresses getting cut on a ladder, and people falling in a cake, and like it's a mess. You've seen
Gangs of New York, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Remember the scene when the different fire brigades are fighting each other over who gets to put out the fire and loot things? They're more responsible than all these people trying to put out this fire. And the people I'm talking about were gang lords in old New York run by Tammany Hall.
Yeah. Actually, it was funny. I was thinking at the opening of this, when the fire truck arrives at this place, everyone, it looks like they're looting the building, but I'm assuming they're clearing everything out from it.
Yeah, they're clearing everything out. Yeah,
right.
It's not like Gangs of New York in that respect.
I'm watching it and I'm saying, oh, this is why there are fire lanes in front of modern buildings, because this truck cannot get anywhere close to this building that's on fire, because these people have just poured these tables and chairs and furniture out immediately in front of this place. And I was like, oh, this is why there are fire lanes. How interesting. Okay,
Fun fact, Marshall, I'm the reason you have fire lanes. Thank you very fucking much. As all this is going on, the Countess Helga von Stahl hears the music across the way. Not the fire and everything that's going on, but just the music. From the dressmaker shop, Shawnee and Rezi are rescued, quote unquote, by Leopold. Rezi, her dress tears, and she's ridiculed because her dress tears, leaving her in nothing but basically her bloomers. And she runs into the dress shop to escape the jeering and whatnot.
That's right. And, it's the dress shop that's across the street. They're actually in the second floor of the bakery.
Yeah, they're in the second floor of the bakery. She goes across to the dress shop.
Right. I was incorrect earlier.
Yeah, and so she goes in. Shawnee gets the skirt and goes into the shop in search of her, and that's when he meets the Countess. And the Countess learns that Shawnee is, an aspiring musician, and the Countess has been writing verses, and she wants to put some of her verses to music that Shawnee would write.
Has she been writing verses, though? Or is this guy just dreamy, and she's a lonely housewife?
Well, when we meet, not just a housewife, but royalty, sir.
Yes,
royalty.
Yeah, how dare I?
To me, she's royalty. Oh, Max von Sydow, I'm glad you came in for a minute. But no, when we meet her husband, we'll understand why she would do anything, include learning to write lyrics to get away from him, or at least take some time off. It looks like they're on the ropes marriage-wise, and she just needs a break, man. We've got a romantic triangle set up here when, as the Countess is giving Shawnee her information, Rezi enters, and she just immediately becomes suspicious. Like, what are you doing with that woman? And
yeah, she knows what's up.
Yeah, and the character is written as such that she will not listen to any explanation whatsoever, regardless of how tangible and realistic it might sound. That's one of the disservices that is necessary for the story that they're telling. But it's almost like she's annoyingly unreasonable, and I feel like that's the one biggest disservice I have with her character. But the way they're writing this story and wanting to tell this story, I completely get it. So
yeah, because we're watching a melodrama. It's a love story, and it's this Countess has her eyes on this young artist who's not respected by either his father or, for financial purposes, his lover, his girlfriend.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of like, is he going to choose destitution working at a bakery and so that he can be with his, love of his life? or is he going to follow the rich and fame of becoming a composer, which is being promised to him by this love of this countess? The only problem is that they're trying to follow a traditional love arc of these two people who start together and are supposed to break apart and then end up together. But she's the same person who is telling him, don't be who you are. So you have this problem of the sort of like the want versus the need are in direct opposition coming from the same person.
Yep. What her want is weird, because her want is, I want you to do what you love to do as long as it all revolves around me. Her need is to realize that she needs to let go of him, like let a leash off of a bit in order to let him do his musical aspirations. And that's not obviously, but it feels like it's handled in such a way that it just, the whole time I'm watching it, I'm like, man, I really wish they weren't painting her to be such a jerk, because
it's like she wants him to write music.
Yeah.
And she wants him to do that until she knows that the Countess thinks he's handsome.
Yeah. So it turns into a weird possession game that demeans all three of them.
Right. And so now you don't know, like, you don't have any person, you don't have any relationship to root for. Because, you also know that the Countess is being underhanded and is dangling this carrot in front of this, cute young boy.
Yeah.
And so she's not being forward and she's being manipulative. And Rezi is being childish and possessive.
Yeah.
And so the only thing that you end up caring about is actually what the film and the story is about, because it's called what? Oh, Waltzes from Vienna. So, like, that's what the film ends up being about, but it spends so much time around the love triangle.
Yeah. And now, granted, when we talk about musicals all throughout the eras, regardless of whether it's the 30s or today, if you're doing a musical surrounded by a historical event or something that actually happened, you obviously tend to you create a relatable story in order to fill it around the actual historical event for the most part. Like, it's that relatable character that you can touch upon. I mean, in the case of something like The Greatest Showman, they completely reworked an actual figure in history and created new relatable characters in order to tell the story of P.T. Barnum. And if you haven't seen it, Marshall, you don't need to. It's fine. You don't... It and Waltzes from Vienna have a very similar problem of just like, how much relatability do we create and take away from the context of what actually goes on? You're right. I don't really care about that aspect. Like, there's no relationships that I'm hooking onto in this movie, except for one. I have one coupling that I care about, and they're only in one scene, and we're going to get to them here in a second.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I would liken it to give an analogy of sort of how this film feels, and why I say I don't like any of these characters, I don't care about them, is that it would be like if in Titanic it was set up that Billy Zane's character was the main character trying to get Rose, but that Kathy Bates, her Molly Brown, also had eyes for Cal. And so it was this love triangle between who's gonna, or not even Kathy Bates, because Molly Brown's freaking lovable and she's great. So like Rose's mom, if it wasn't this weird mother-daughter thing. But it would be something like that. It would be if this other rich debutante, some first leveler, was also a first leveler with Rose, and Billy Zane is your main character. It's just like, I don't care. I don't like any of you, and I don't want you to succeed. And it's all placed around this historic event, and it's like, ugh, yeah, it's
unless James Cameron told me specifically, look, this movie that's set on the Titanic is strictly about shitty people and why they all deserve to drown. Then, if he gives me that context, I'll watch that movie with Billy Zane as the lead. But
Yeah,
But no,
but
you're
then
right.
your perspective needs to be like an over the shoulder from the iceberg.
Yeah.
And it's sweeping in with the Indiana Jones theme to like save the day and crash the Titanic.
You know what? We talked about this early on, but Hitchcock had been one of the projects he was going to work on was with Selznick was a Titanic movie, and they actually did a lot of research into it, and they went on a boat that was going to be serving as the Titanic itself. And Hitchcock, being the director who he was, I imagine that at some point in the production it would have been like, what if we did it from the perspective of the thing that's going to kill them? Like, I want to know his story. And it would be fucking great. Probably not a great movie, but it would have been great to watch it.
You
just
could
to
slow
see what
down
would come of it.
and drop the pitch of the Jaws theme and have that be the iceberg theme.
Oh, it's a mobile iceberg. See, that's the twist that I'm making.
Yeah.
Rose?
Sorry,
Dun,
having
dun,
too much
dun,
fun.
dun, dun, dun. Shawnee goes to rehearse with his father in the orchestra because he works in his father's orchestra. His father, Johann Strauss Sr., played by Edmund Gwenn, who would end up being in a lot of Hitchcock films, in a career that spanned like all the way up until like he starts in 1916 and ends up in 1956 with his last film being Calabuck, or The Rocket from Calabuck. But he ended up finding himself all over different forms of Hitchcock and just kind of it's one of those stock English actors that works well for the films that he tells, where they can play kind of a stuffy, authoritative figure.
Yeah, he was famously in Them! Exclamation point.
Yep.
And he won an Oscar for playing Kris Kringle in Miracle on
34th Street. And one of my favorite films that he's in is The Yank at Oxford, which is he's wonderful in that film too.
Which another little fun little bit of trivia: if you are watching Hollywood on Netflix,
I have not yet.
the year that takes place, the Oscar ceremony that takes place, is the one in which he won for Kris Kringle.
Nice.
Yeah.
Are you liking the show?
I really adore it. It doesn't end up being what I thought it was going to be, and I'm glad that I didn't read about what it actually is and what its purpose as a television series is and what it's trying to do. I'm really glad I didn't know that going in, because it was quite a wild ride. But it's a pretty wonderful, like, quasi modern approach to that era of Hollywood.
Very nice.
And they're doing this like kind of weird thing where you can tell that the actors are playing characters, but they're doing it in that sort of style of acting as the character part.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're also acting that way in the films. That it's this little small nuanced way of doing those things, and it's very enjoyable. I highly recommend it.
I'll have to check it out then. Gwen, though, with his involvement with Hitchcock, amongst the things he runs around in, he's obviously in Foreign Correspondent playing Rowley, as it's a small role in the film. He's a Cockney assassin in it. But one of his finest film roles that I think should have won him an Oscar if this film was treated with any respect at the time that it was released is The Trouble with Harry, where he plays Captain Albert Wiles. He's just wonderful in that film, and it's another situation where like some of the better films even still get the shit treatment in the time that they're released, and it takes a little time for them to be appreciated. But if you haven't seen Trouble with Harry, Marshall, watch it for him and everybody involved, but he especially. It's an old man who's falling in love with another elderly person. It's the sweetest romance you'll ever see in a Hitchcock movie,
all right.
Let alone a movie. It's a cute little comedy about how you can't get rid of a dead body.
I'll check it out.
Yeah, but so anyway, back to Waltzes from Vienna. See how interesting this is that we have to dive into Netflix shows and The Trouble with Harry.
Funny little again, like speaking to the cleverness in the dialogue, is Johann Strauss Jr. plays in his very famous father's orchestra, and in that orchestra, he is literally the second fiddle.
Yeah,
and I when I heard that, I was like, okay, like I I can't tell if that's really amazingly clever or like really cheesy as hell, but it's just like, oh, so you play second fiddle for your father instead of to your father? Okay, cool. I like it. All right, I'll go along with it.
It's cheeky placement, and obviously that's like I didn't do research into the actual Johann Strauss family, but like that, if that's a construction of the stage musical, that's very clever, and that's something that transfers over.
Yeah, almost all of this is a construction. There was no resi, there was no bakery, and at the time that the Blue Danube Bee was composed, Johann Strauss Sr. was already dead.
Yeah, so this is again just like. This is a situation of just like, look, we want to really tell the story about this wonderful song, but we can't do anything real because there's nothing there's nothing intriguingly significant about it.
Yeah.
But so they get into an argument about just being the second fiddle, literally, and he ridicules his son's work, like he just lays into him.
In a scene that I had to rewind it and watch it 2 other times because my jaw hit my lap. Hitch flops the 180 line.
Yep.
In that scene. And there's this confrontation between father and son, and the son saying, someone's going to come along and write better music than you. That's the way the world works. Like, things keep on turning, they keep on getting better. And the father sort of prods him and is like, oh, what, you think you're going to do it? Well, why don't you play something that you've done? And sits his son down at a piano. And there's these shots back and forth between them. And there's this cinematography idea that keeps consistent film
the
direction. The
logic of eyeline, yeah. It's supposed to indicate the space.
Right. So indicate the space, and so that when one character is looking one direction and you cut to the other direction, that it actually looks like they're looking at each other, and so you can keep track of what's going on, amongst other things. And so one thing you're never supposed to do is cut from the camera on one side of the 180-degree line to this other side of the 180-degree line, and that happens in this scene. And there was the cutting back and forth between father and son, and I kind of went back in my seat and I was like, what just happened there? Did he just jump the line? And I had to rewind it, and I was like, he did. And then I rewound it again because like, there's no way. I have to be wrong. Rewound it again. Nope. He flopped the line.
You think the Wachowskis are the only ones who could do that, motherfucker? Hitchcock did it first. No, it's true that it does flip the line. What's interesting is prior to that line flip, the angle from the piano to them from afar, it's not strictly Hitchcockian, but just the way it's composed, it suggests a little bit of intimidation for Strauss Jr. That I was like, that's pretty cool that they're finding a way to make this conversation interesting beyond the squabbling of father and son. And then, with everything boiling to the point that it does, like, I don't know if it's an unjustified or justified 180 line. It literally might just be something that just happened and they didn't fix it.
Yeah,
that's my honest opinion.
That's where I lean.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's just like, well, we're not like, I don't need to change it. It doesn't really affect anything. Like, it does. It stands out to us now because we're not only aware of these rules, but we are able to frame by frame look. And imagine an audience back in 1934. They may not notice it right away. Like,
yeah, and it's not like they had video playback.
That'd be cool if they did.
To review what they just shot. And so if it was, again, I just always think about the, knowing that the staircase sequence when the detective or the PI first arrives at the house, that was all, that there was a first run of that when Hitchcock wasn't there. And he was just like, I'm not going to show up to set today. I'm kind of bored. So knowing that is a thing that Hitchcock is capable of, I kind of wonder if he was there on set to pick up on that or notice it.
But regardless, if it's there, it's still there in all its glory. And the whole confrontation ends up with Strauss Jr. quitting the orchestra. And we are then we are basically whisked over then immediately to the Countess's place, and her of writing the lyrics to the Blue Danube, the verses that, by the way, come to nothing later on down the line. The verses mean nothing because all we want to know is how does this music going to play out. And she's writing these verses, and in walks her husband, Prince Gustav, played by Frank Vosper. This is a joke, right?
Well, the thing is just like, okay, so then Kenneth Mars, when he was coming up with Inspector Kemp,
yep,
for Young Frankenstein, definitely had watched Waltzes from Vienna, right? Because we're maybe 3 notches up the dial to 11 with Inspector Kemp, where what is it? Strauss? No, not Strauss.
Prince Gustav.
Gustav. That's it.
Yeah.
Prince Gustav is. Yeah, I was just like, this guy is a character.
Yeah, it's almost to my mind, it's a little bit if. Yeah, I like the Kenneth Mars allegory. I'm gonna one up it a little bit, or not one up it, but add on to it. It's like if Inspector Kemp and the character that Kenneth Mars plays in The Producers, Hans Liebken, had a baby, and it turned out to be a goofy aristocrat baby. That's kind of what it is.
Yeah, and so to paint the picture, the introduction of this character is he is asleep in his bed, and he is waving his arm around wildly and talking as he is having a duel by sword in
for
his
the
sleep.
honor of the Countess, by the way. It should be pointed out. He loves his wife to have a fight for her in his sleep.
In his sleep. And it goes on, and you will never believe what the climax is built around with that sort of a character introduction.
It's a goofy scene. I don't mind it on its own because it's just like, oh, this is a thing that was shot in 1934. Just a scene to establish a goofy husband who clearly isn't attentive to his wife's needs, and he's aloof. He's off in his own little damn world.
It's the film I'm working on. I've got a couple writing partners, and one of the things that continually comes up with us is tone, and it's sort of like matching this tone, and because we're walking a high wire act with the story that we're telling and the movie we're trying to make. But the idea of like this Coen Brothers-esque tone has been brought up, and one of the things that I talked about as an example in this writing group that I would use here as well as an example is this character, Prince Gustav, would be like if the Jesus character from Big Lebowski showed up in No Country for Old Men. They're both Coen Brothers films.
Yeah.
And they both have their quirks.
Yeah.
But they don't always go together. It's just like it's heightened just past, not even just, it like totally breaks the ceiling.
Yeah.
Past believability into this like cartoonish nature. But in The Big Lebowski, Jesus fits.
Yeah.
Like Jesus is amazing in that film. Yeah.
The only thing Prince Gustav does that lends credibility to the genre that they're doing, this isn't unheard of to have like a more goofier side character that plays an important part in a musical, especially when it comes to a love triangle. Like, and heck, we could even take this to screwball comedy level. Like, you don't really need Ralph Bellamy in The Awful Truth because he becomes non-essential by the end of The Awful Truth, but he's fun to have around, right? That's similar logic in this respect, and it adds some sort of stake to the Countess in terms of like, this is why she's doing what she's doing, but it doesn't execute itself well by any stretch. No. And this is a musical that we should point out is like is an hour and 16 minutes, so this is not a long movie. So there's not enough time to establish what Gustav and the Countess's marital issues are, and more to the point, like why would he at the end of the movie suddenly give a shit? Because he seems to not really give a shit up until the very end.
Well, I think it's I mean, I think that there's something there about the duels for her honor in his dreams only, and that you see that it's actually a reflection on his view of his own masculinity.
Yeah.
And that it has nothing to do with his wife's honor. It all has to do with the fact that he doesn't want to be a cuckold.
Yeah.
And
the property thing again.
Right. Exactly. What do you say about me? And the fact of the matter is that she does not find him attractive, and she's not interested in him, but is interested in somebody else. And that is the slight. It's not the other person, putting their hand on his rhubarb, as it were. It's actually about being not wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the vulnerable masculinity, or fragile masculinity, rather.
Yeah. And it goes into so much that I talked earlier about my favorite coupling in the movie. One of the maids, one of the butlers have the best relationship in this entire movie. That I want that's what I want the movie to be. But they have a conversation as the Countess goes off to write the verses to the Blue Danube, and they're blue, 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 Danube, Danube, like that whole thing. They're trying to come up with like what you would call the Danube, and they're going like, what is the color of a Danube? It's brown. As the husband and the wife are having this conversation, and the intermediaries are a maid and a butler who are passionately making love and communicating back and forth between the husband and the wife. It's the
making out.
Cutest. It's the
30s.
It's the cutesy equivalent of the, well, you can tell Mr. Burns there that I will not, do the laundry. Oh yeah, well, you can tell Miss Allen that I won't stop smoking in the house. That whole comic bit that's so wonderful. The difference is that I'm seeing two people that I'd rather see in a movie, and I'd love Hitchcock to do it. Why not? But so yeah, that's how the verses start forming, and then she and Shawnee start rehearsing. And we get an instance of Hitchcock for the first time, really, because this is a new sound era, really starting to work with music and how it works to imagery. Now, it's not, to describe it for the audience, I'm not talking about like an elaborate musical number and there's no choreography by Busby Berkeley happening around the place. It's really it's a rotating shot around a piano, and through the imagery is communicating the desires and wants of the characters in that scene near the piano rehearsing, and then cutting suddenly to Rezzy's character in a cut that I at first thought was abrupt when I first saw this movie, and then I would rewind it and go, no, this is what the communication tool is. So he's already learning how music can be used, not just in the musical format, but also what can he do to communicate things with music down the line. Obviously, when we get to a film like Shadow of a Doubt, a waltz is a very important thing in Shadow of a Doubt. As we talk about like music in Hitchcock's films and how it relates to terror, Bernard Herrmann would be the definition of communicating the terror with the music, not necessarily to cue the audience, but to enhance the audience's terror. And this is all starting from a fluffy light musical. This isn't coming from him doing a horror movie and then just saying, what if I put something scary like a creepy Victrola song? This is where he learns those tools.
Yeah.
He says in an interview that, and I loved how he expressed this. Waltzes from Vienna gave me many opportunities for working out ideas in relation to film and music. Naturally, every cut in the film was worked out on the script before shooting began. But more than that, the musical cuts were worked out too. And that's actually very evident when you watch anything musical happening in this movie. The
editing around the orchestra is really, at the end of the day, it's not dissimilar to some of the cutting and the rhythm in Whiplash.
Yep, I agree, absolutely.
There's drama in it. It is very well done.
Yeah, and it communicates by the end of that picture the entire conflict that Strauss has had with his father and how he's letting all that energy out, and that assurance that he's able to get from his own success as a result of going out and doing it. I mean, we're jumping a little ahead there, but because basically between now and here, the biggest thing that happens is Strauss goes to the bakery that Rezzy's father operates, and that's when he starts getting more ideas for the Danube. What's interesting is that this doesn't have music in it really so much as it just has sound cues that will then become parts of the Blue Danube, and a lot of it has to do with pastries being struck down at a specific tempo. And he suddenly gets the idea of like dun 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 dun.
Yeah, it's a fascinating sequence, and it is like there is some very subtle sound mixing going on because there are hints of the actual waltz.
Yep. Being
played at very low volume in sequence with these things that are going on in the bakery as he's getting this tour. Yeah, I mean it's this is going to sound like I'm being condescending. I'm not, but it's like it's kind of a cute sequence.
Yeah. No, it's and full disclosure, if you watch this movie and you're wondering like why is it like so cliched and over the top, it's just like, well, that's just because it's what it is. There's nothing like the things that we're finding that are positive about it are more in technique and less in story. Like this story does nothing to advance its genre, let alone Hitchcock's career whatsoever.
It's a simple story, simply told, and I think that, as far as the comedy goes, again, the screenplay is relatively well done, especially the comedy and the character quips.
Yeah,
it's not much of a step away from the wonderful banter in like North by Northwest and stuff that we'll see much later on.
Exactly.
And that sort of like romantic banter and back and forth and very smart alecky sort of stuff. What is so interesting to me though is watching, and I don't know if this is purely like having only a British mentality and trying to apply this vaudevillian or like American silent film, Buster Keaton, Charlie Chaplin-esque physical comedy to what's going on, and it's just like it again, except for the pipe smoke coming out of the window, it never works. And every time it happens, I just like rolled my eyes and let out a huge sigh. I was like, can we get on with the rest of this, please? Because like this is not working.
And it's inherent in most comedies of the era, because especially in this transition period, like there is an obvious, there's a jerk reaction that you have of like comedy. Well, let's make something physical. One, because we're still transitioning from silence to sound, but also it's something that's proven for that era. So it's something that could feasibly work. Does it work in this story? No, not even. No. Like the banter that Revel and Hitch are putting together works 10 times better than any pratfall that they have to stick in there. I by the time the bakery is relatively subtle compared to the things that are wrapped around it. Like it's a pretty standard like guy goes to an office job that he doesn't want to go to and finds humorous things in it. The bakery sequence is kind of reminds me of the musical composing scene in like August Rush, where he's hearing the sounds around the city and being inspired by it and just kind of being fueled with this artistic inspiration. Yeah. And I think that's the difference between the physical comedy of, say, the Fire Brigade and what is going on at the bakery, is that what's going on at the bakery is storytelling. Yeah. We're visually and orally telling the story and experiencing the creation of this masterpiece. Yeah. And so from that
standpoint, it's very fun. It's interesting. And like I said, it's cute because of sort of the way that it comes about.
Yeah.
And that's different than going for a laugh and going for the pratfall.
Yeah. And in addition, it with the characterization of Strauss, albeit with the archetypes that we have been discussing, he is able to communicate his hesitation with his relationship with Resi and what it means through this sequence of being inspired in this bakery. So he's able to communicate to the audience without, saying out loud, I want to be an artist, not a baker, even though he does say that out loud at least once in this movie. That's the scene where it's just like, no, your tour of this bakery does not matter, but what is happening is inspiring me to do the other thing that I'd like to do. So in a sense, like it's not only a funny scene, but it also it tells the story and it advances it further along. It creates a further dilemma for him as we get into the moments when there's a conflict that arises post this between Resi and the Countess because of who it's dedicated to.
Yes. But I think that just real quick before we continue with the plot, to speak to what you're speaking of and to give credit where credit is due, not only the writing of Johann Strauss Jr., minus the property line, but definitely in the performance, is at no point do you not root for this guy.
Yeah.
It's a really wonderful manifestation of it is possible to be in love with two things at the same time.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of tension and suspense and drama in there because one of the things that he loves will take him away from the other thing that he loves.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way that he can have the other thing that he loves is to give up the other thing that he loves.
Yeah.
And the bakery is the culmination of this because it is all of this tension over the bakery is if you pursue music, then you are therefore turning your back on the bakery and therefore turning your back on your love. But if you say, I'm going to do whatever it takes to pursue my love, then that means that I have to accept the bakery, which means that I cannot make music and do what I love.
Yeah.
And so the drama and the conflict in that is really wonderfully portrayed. And so, again, even though I don't think like Resi is written particularly well, and the Countess has her own issues and isn't someone that we want to see succeed with the love of Johann Strauss Jr. anyway, you never don't want Johann Strauss to get both.
Yeah.
You want him to find some way to get both because you desire that for him.
Yeah. This is a film that, despite the labeling, we have it as a misfire or an early attempt that brings ideas down the line into a more sophisticated manifestation. This film's entirely watchable in the respect of just it. You can watch these characters and get on their different sides, and you can root for Johann, and you can have a sense of fun throughout it and enjoy the story you're watching. It's not like the film we were just discussing before this, where you can't follow a damn thing.
I will, without any hesitation, say that if it were not Hitchcock and I was not going to be recording this podcast, I would have turned off number 17.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would have been like, I don't know what's going on, and I don't care.
Yeah.
So I'm done. I'm not going to push myself through this.
Yeah. And then
that is not the case with Waltzes from Vienna.
Yeah, no. Even if Hitchcock wasn't the person behind this, if they were telling this same story, let's say Alma Revel and Guy Bolton are just doing the script. Alma Revel didn't just work strictly with Hitch in the early years; she worked all over the gamut, right? So say she's tasked to write this script with Bolton, and she's still writing it. If this is the script that comes out and is just directed by another person, regardless of camera work or editing style, it's still an interesting story that you'd want to watch, regardless of the class levels that we deal with, and obviously we addressed up front, which is just like, who cares about these affluent people? But I don't feel like I watch that film and ever say to myself, like, who cares if he writes the Blue Danube? I don't give a shit. I'm like, no, I do. I do care. About that. And maybe that speaks to the artist in me or the artist in you, where it's just like, man, we want to see him chase his dreams. Why the fuck not? Like, but we get that love triangle that coming to a head. That decision then has to be made, and it's tricky, which is interesting because it's a suspense that we talked about in the Mr. and Mrs. Smith discussion, where the tension and the suspense revolves around human relationships and less on anything that's above the average human circumstance. And in this case, it is like, okay, well, clearly I'm going to give it up to be with you, Resi. So he becomes a baker. And meanwhile, the Countess is working behind the scenes to essentially ensure that he does become a success by orchestrating a plan to get the Blue Danube played at a concert that Johann's father is supposed to be leading the orchestra in. And so as the plot progresses along, he gets a letter from the Countess to meet up with her at this festival where the band is going to perform, and Johann's father will be leading the orchestra there. And he has a scene in the bakery where he says, like, I've given up everything for you, but I don't want to have my freedom taken away. Like, he doesn't want to be like tied down to this one specific thing just because he made the ultimate sacrifice. It doesn't mean he gives up everything.
Yeah, because she makes the ultimatum of, like, you can't even go to this thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Not even with any intention to play music or to perform the waltz.
Yeah.
It's just, you can't go.
Yeah. Not even as a baker, because her father's catering this affair.
Right.
But he makes the decision to go. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the Countess's connection delays Johann Sr. from attending the concert by saying, you're going to be given an honor. Just doing like, oh yeah, you're going to get a medal, a shiny medal, like that equivalent conversation, and it delays him. And I love this trick because it's something that could only work in 19th century Vienna. In order to tell him, oh, you've got plenty of time, he rewinds his watch. Now, Marshall, I think the sun and the way it operates in our solar system and the way it revolves, or the way we revolve around it, I don't know if that logically works, but I'm glad it does for the sake of movie magic.
Well, I'm just gonna go out. If this ends up being true, I'm gonna just be very angry. But like, in order to accomplish something like that now, you would need a Mission Impossible-esque feat where they go in and hack the atomic clock that everyone's phones are automatically attached to, because they need to buy 40 minutes so that this dude can jump in someone else's place and conduct the orchestra for the waltz that he composed. You're right. It's something that cannot happen in the modern era without, again, some sort of gigantic Ocean's 19 heist.
You're gonna need 11 guys. Like, there's just it was just a moment that stood out of just like, you can't do that at all anymore. There's no friggin' way that happens. But it does happen here, and the Countess says that it's been arranged that your father will let you lead this number with the orchestra. Clearly a trick. Resi sees that he's getting up to conduct, and
but before that is my moment of tension.
Oh yes.
Everyone on the table starts pounding on the table and going, Strauss, 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 and it was just like, oh, is he gonna get to do this? And it was like, I knew what it meant because Resi was right there watching him, and meanwhile, it's just like all of the tension and all of the narrative, everything was directed to this one scene, and everything was coming to a head at the exact same time in this really masterful way. So it's like, even though I do not care about these characters or the culmination of any of the relationships, like achieving any sort of success, what the plot has told me is important in this moment is all coming to this single moment. Yeah. And I'm actually sitting, like, I'm on the edge of my seat about it, and it was wonderful.
Yeah. And it's in that tension when it is finally released with the Blue Danube still manages to add its own suspense in the respect of just how he's constructing from frame by shot composition the different angles of this performance going on.
Right.
It's not so much Hitchcockian, it's just smart filmmaking. And it's smart editing early on in an era where you're being able to communicate with sound and you have these shots and you obviously have a piece of music that you can lay in on that track easier than a dialogue scene. And it was one of those moments where when I was watching it again last night, I was like, man, like this is how you make an orchestra movie. This is how you edit it and you construct it. We need to see that full spectrum. Something that I find even more interesting is that he spends the first portion of that on the audience and their reactions. So he's not
lack of reaction at the beginning.
Exactly.
Which is really wonderful.
And typically when we do a scene like this, we usually start on the band, we stick on that band, and then lead into the audience. I like how it's flipped here. Because then as it finally gets to the end of it, we're behind the orchestra looking at Johann.
Yes.
And it's
and even once you cut to the audience, you would do one, maybe a wide shot, or maybe cut into, a medium with a group of people, a handful of people, and then you would either, boom down or cut to someone's foot, immediately start tapping.
Yeah.
And that's not what he does. He holds with just this audience just staring and staring and staring.
Yeah.
And then people just barely start to sway.
Yep.
And move. And it's this wonderful, like, he doesn't give it to you right away. He doesn't say, don't worry, everything's going to be fine.
Yeah. Well, also, Marshall, we British don't tap our feet. Fun fact, we don't do it. But you're right. No, he allows that to build, and it grows so much so that the music works in tandem with the suspense, so that when the music ends, we have, not to put the sexual allegory on it, but we climax, and
yeah, and it's a crescendo.
Yeah, exactly.
Right as Dad walks in.
Yeah,
just how just
yeah,
to
it ruins everything,
metaphor.
much like the allegory that I made regarding to sex. No, but so yeah, so it culminates as a big success. Applause are had, and Johann's father is. It's hard to tell off of Edmund Gwenn until you know the ending of the movie. But it looks like he really looks like he has just been told that his that his wife is leaving him, or like that he's the ultimate cuck in the world or something, because the anger on Edmund Gwenn's face.
Yeah, it feels like he just walked in on his son.
Yeah.
Having
it's
to continue the metaphor again.
That boiling, that seething look, the only way it looks even more obvious is if his face turns into a tea kettle that's boiling like in a cartoon. And he has it out with with his son. And we should say also, amidst all this, Leonard, Leopold, our baker rival, has had a fun little comic side quest. And Resi tells him, like, don't worry, you'll meet somebody as wonderful as me. And he becomes important because he leads them to the climax of the finale of the movie, which is the Countess and Johann Strauss meeting up. Prior to that, Johann, now discovering that his father knew nothing about this performance, is taken aback, and he's retreating rather than, falling in line with the adulation that he's receiving, and runs off. The Countess follows him. Meanwhile, Prince Gustav enters the festival and proceeds to essentially goof about until the father just lets it loose, like, yeah, your wife and my son have just run off together because they've been doing musical hanky-panky around your back. So with the climax,
making a different type of music.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, making different beautiful music together, and it ends with Resi then rushing off also to join this actual triangle about to unfold. It eventually becomes a square because Gustav runs in to discover them talking, and they duke it out. But prior to that, the conversation that ultimately becomes character defining about, how famous he's going to be. This is the only on the nose moment that I had a bit of an eye roll toward, and it's not because of antiquity or anything. I don't like this in a lot of films where someone of historical note, someone tells them you're going to be great, or like the world will know your name. My least favorite part of Straight Outta Compton is when Ice Cube's son, playing Ice Cube, is writing the final words of the script for Friday. So that will give you an idea of where my eye roll was coming from. Having said that, though, it does wrap up his character and like the decisions he's going to have to make. Him and Gustav duke it out. Resi and him embrace. And that basically ends his arc. It's just that he's going to be able to have it both now because Resi finally understands.
Well, Resi saves his life.
Yeah.
Because Gustav shows up and the Countess has hidden herself in the bathroom.
Yeah.
Another hiding of a bathroom.
Yeah, and Gustav, finally not aloof, is about to kill him.
Yeah, so they duke it out because he thinks correctly that the Countess is in the bathroom. But Resi has gone up some back window.
Yeah.
And has swapped places with the Countess so that she opens the door, revealing, oh, it's not your wife in here, and you're not being cuckolded, and saving the young Strauss's life.
Yeah.
And then the Countess comes up the stairs and is like, oh, husband, you beat me. Wow, you're fast. Isn't that wonderful? Thus giving up her aspirations for some young buck lover.
Ouch.
And the note that the film ends on, like, again, for all of its faults and for all of the eye rolling and the heavy sighs and the I don't care about any of this, that last scene, like, Zach, I got choked up.
Yeah.
It was so, like, I'm getting choked up now just thinking about it. Like,
yep.
It's really, really well done.
Should we tell them the scene? Because it's a good scene.
Yeah, go for it.
So the scene then cuts to the empty festival, and the elder Strauss is walking around alone, an embittered old man filled with what I'm assuming is shame because of what's to come. And a little girl goes up to him and says, "May I have your autograph, Mr. Strauss?" Takes the book and signs it, and then he gives it back to her, and then he says, "Hold on, little girl," gets it back, and he adds an addendum, which is Johann Strauss Sr. Closes the book, hands it to the girl. We fade out.
And it's beautiful.
It's
so beautiful.
With literally 2 lines of dialogue, all told, between just the little girl and him.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing but imagery. We get the father's realization within the span of, what, less than a minute, or maybe at a minute? I would say less than a minute. And that's communicating an entire character change with virtually no dialogue. That is pure cinema at its core. It doesn't require you to be visually spectacular with whether it's with lighting or cinematography. You can communicate intimate emotions between actors with virtually no dialogue and communicate that character change like all in the span of 30 seconds.
Yeah, is that there's this which again, I think that the success of this scene speaks to the faults of the film.
Yeah.
Is that what this movie is actually about is a young man wanting to, at the end of the day, fulfill his destiny.
Yep.
But that's what he must do. But what he wants to do is earn the respect and blessing and love of his father.
Yep.
And so by the end of the film, through his own efforts and through these, crazy machinations and crossings and double crossings of people around him, he's able to achieve what he must do.
Yep.
And completely unbeknownst to him. He's never in the same room. I don't think this is ever going to be acknowledged between them. But he actually ends up accomplishing what he wants. And there's something that's really sort of, again, like speaking to the tragedy of fragile masculinity that's really that's really touching about that, and is sad, and is this very like melancholy moment, even though it's a success, it's an achievement, but you know that it's between these two people who are never going to be able to be comfortable in the same room around each other, and it's just this really poignant, sad moment. It's really beautiful,
and it's a baton, it's a torch passing that I think manages to. I like how it communicates a much more positive message than I was expecting when I first saw the film. Let alone from a musical that is not. It's weird. Like, this is a musical. It's not a musical with musical numbers. It's a movie about music, to a degree, and the egos that can come within that, and. I didn't get teary-eyed during it, but what I loved was the profound look on Edmund Gwen's face after he hands the book back for the last time. It's a look that he gives that I think only actors of a certain age are allowed to give. Nobody below 50 can give that look and pull it off convincingly. No, it can't be done.
Yeah,
and
I mean, it comes from a recognition of mortality.
Yeah,
ultimately, and I as someone who is plagued by the idea of the two deaths and very strongly believes in that, I think that there's maybe that's part of why it was so moving to me is the scene where the father he's not rolling over, right? He's not saying I'm going to stop composing music and screw you, but he's sort of stepping aside and saying, like, there's room for two of us, and someday you're going to sign your name in this book as well.
Yeah.
And it's going to be important that they be differentiate. You can differentiate between them. And that you being great doesn't do anything to erase my legacy.
Yeah.
That we can both be great. And I really, and there's something that understanding from not just an intellectual standpoint, but from an actual emotional standpoint is only possible from people who have lived longer than other people who can only intellectualize that idea.
Yeah.
So that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that it ultimately and it also, like, it's interesting with the way it addresses fragile masculinity in that respect is it's fascinating to see how in these older films there are moments with those things addressed. But unlike what we can do today, they're working slyly within a code of, it's not even a censor code. It's a code of just what the societal order is of that point in time, and where certain people are on this imaginary chain or tier system that doesn't really exist. It never existed, but it was important to this society, and yet we're able to address them in tiny moments. And then that's why these films are able to last for decades beyond their release and their initial reception, is that within even the corniest black and white movie, there's an addressment of something that we can latch onto in a current era, because it's either a human issue or it's an issue that we're not allowed to talk about right now, but we're going to hint at it, and then you as a viewer can decipher it down the line, whether intentional or not. And this is an example of something that is able to be addressed down the line with somebody as intelligent as you.
And thank you. I will accept the compliment. You may be wildly off base, but I'll accept it. But the thing about that for me that I think that, and especially, and I'm sorry if I'm being super in my head. I am in the middle of like co-writing a film right now, so
yeah.
I'm being very heady about this sort of stuff in films. Is that I'm not even going to go so far as to say anyone involved, whether it's with the operette or with the screenplay, even up to Hitchcock himself, could actually articulate the sort of things that I just talked about that happened in that scene.
Yeah.
But what I do think happened is they were diligent about saying this needs to be based in truth.
Yeah.
And we're not going to end this the way that a musical would end, with some amazing celebration and Elder Strauss like extending his elbow to walk Resi down the, down the aisle to the Blue Danube. It's just like, it's not, that would be a contrivance.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be based in that. It would be based on, like, we need to make everyone feel happy and everything like that. But it's saying, who is this character, and what does this sort of acceptance and what does this sort of like acceptance and embrace look like?
Yeah.
This guy would never say congratulations to his son. He would never wrap his arms around his son. But what he would do is add a postscript to his name to acknowledge the idea that he is now no longer the only Johann Strauss.
And that's why I say that, and that's why I say it's a musical, because it's a movie about music, and that addressment is much more important, sorry Resi, than the love story. Because the music itself has been permeating the film. This is an example of, like, if we're going to get specific with Hitchcock, he does the right thing, in my opinion, by stripping it of any ancillary numbers that are meant to communicate character action and motivation, which is your typical musical trope. And it's done to mostly good success when you make a good musical film, right? In this one, it's like, well, no, the piece of music is the Blue Danube. This is what we're centering it around. We're not going to have a Gilbert and Sullivan affair where everybody's dancing around. This is focused on a piece of music. It is a musical. And so that addressment at the end, that being the final moment and not a wedding where everybody's all happy, is much more important and a good way to end it. Hitchcock told Truffaut about this film, this is the lowest ebb of my career. And yet, even with the lowest ebb of his career, he still has the knowledge and the truth within his filmmaking to end it on a proper note and to take it seriously, regardless of if it's an assignment or not for him.
Right.
And that's what I find fascinating about as we move into our final film. When we talk about Waltzes from Vienna, it's a film that you're not going to know right away that it's Hitchcock. If you look in the visual scheme and really pay attention, you'll see different things that he's doing, whether it's through editing or shot composition. But this is one of the last points, the second to last point, I would even say, where he's able to keep experimenting with stuff before he goes into the perfection of all these elements. And I'm happy that it's not my favorite of the three we're going to be discussing, but it's obviously my second favorite because there's only one other option. But it's a film that I think, I think Hitchcock, with all due respect to the Master of Suspense, I feel like he should give himself a little more credit, because I think that he did a fine job with it, given what he had to work with. And the result that comes out is more than sufficient. Now, as far as it being a Hitchcock film, obviously it's not. So, essentially, this as we're leaving Waltzes from Vienna, Hitchcock doesn't regard this with anything high, although it should be pointed out that there are a lot of people who feel like us that there are ways to address this, not just to the future things that Hitchcock does, but also giving it a little more credit than just relegating it off to the dustbin of history.
Yeah, there are pieces of it that are really worth looking at. I think that, in specific, I've talked about the physical comedy is horrible, but the script is really great. We've talked about the highlights between the maid and the butler, that sort of stuff. There are some really great transitions from not only from scene to scene, but also, you touched on when Strauss is first with the Countess, and we're cutting back and forth to Resi to be like, this is still a thing that exists.
Yeah.
Or is a thing that is being put into jeopardy, and we understand that just through the use of montage and the cut, which is really masterful. And of course, we talked about the end, and I think that ultimately, I did not, when I was watching these films, I did not look at the years that they like when they were made.
Yeah.
And so I accidentally watched them in reverse chronological order. But this was the first movie in watching these three when I made the note of like, this is why it's so important for creatives to be creating as much as they can and to be practicing, is because you can really see him starting to like, he's built up a muscle that he doesn't quite know how to use yet in terms of executing some of these things in film. That's really kind of neat to be like, oh, like this one piece worked and it didn't connect to anything else. You didn't know how to like follow through or how to set it up, but this piece really worked really well, or this piece worked really well.
Exactly.
And it's fascinating to watch, but it's a good inspiration and sort of life lesson, I think.
Yeah. And this comes out in 1934, talking release dates and such. This same year, one of the classics, The Man Who Knew Too Much from 1934, is released. So in between, he's already making a film that will become a masterpiece to the all time. And the following year, he makes the 39 Steps in 1935, which is arguably one of the most popular of his British Gamo films. And then the next year, he makes a film called Secret Agent. And this is going to be our third and final film to discuss today. From 1936, this is based off of a story by W. Somerset Maugham and a play by Campbell Dixon. And the two stories that it's kind of loosely based on are in a book by Somerset Maugham called Ashendon or the British Agent. The film stars Madeleine Carroll, Peter Lorre, John Gielgud, and Robert Young. And Michael Redgrave, who would be a prominent part of The Lady Vanishes, makes a brief appearance in the film. And so with Secret Agent, we deal with a very interesting situation in Hitchcock's oeuvre. To my mind, one of these big parts of it is that this is in between the 39 Steps and Sabotage. And we've talked about Sabotage before, which was a box office failure, and part of what Hitchcock attributes to it is the bomb going off and killing the kid, and he goes, "No, the child, no." But what's interesting is that there's a lot of things where I'm glad the way it plays out here, because it allows Sabotage to play out the way it does, because then he learns a valuable lesson in Sabotage about where to draw that line on suspense and just straight out, masochism, as he was ultimately thinking. Obviously, I have my opinion on Sabotage and it being just a fine moment in that movie in terms of it propelling the plot forward. With Secret Agent, we see the continuation of stuff that happens in things like the 39 Steps. We're talking espionage here. We're talking specifically World War I espionage. So it's not even alluding to things for World War II in an indirect way. It's as close an allegory as you're going to get for impending war. What's interesting is that it plays out like an anti-war movie. Specifically with our hero played by John Gielgud and Madeleine Carroll. I
just wanted to give a shout out to John Gielgud because he was in Caligula, and so
yes.
he's amazing for having been in Caligula. So he gets all my props.
Yeah, and John Gielgud also an Oscar winner for Arthur, so he's known for being a British agent, a butler in a Dudley Moore movie, and a sex movie. Although Caligula obviously has a lot more going on in it. It's not just the thing. Yeah, there are things that are
power. That's it, right
there. But yeah, it. What's interesting is because of the way it plays out, it's almost like it feels like this is Hitchcock. Like a not middling, but just like it's fine. It's aggressively fine. it's my favorite of the three we're discussing because of just the tiny isolated elements that are in it that I know get perfected down the line, and I'm just kind of able to ride its wavelength.
Yeah. So let me ask you something. As someone who I really tried to fit this in before coming on, I just couldn't quite accomplish that. I have not seen the 39 Steps, but in all of the research that I have done into Secret Agent, it seems like Hitchcock was really trying to get lightning to strike in a bottle twice.
Yeah, very much
even so far as the lead from 39 Steps, Robert Donat, is that how you pronounce it?
Robert Donat, he wanted him for it.
Yeah, he wanted him for it, but he got ill, and so he had to pull out of the project.
Yeah, and John Gielgud is replacement. And,
yes,
we just gave praise to John Gielgud, but we're gonna be honest here on the Shamley Silhouette, and the honesty is that John Gielgud is not interested in anything. He's not.
No.
He's not very. You know what he's doing? He's doing exactly what people accuse John Gavin of doing in Psycho, where he's just a stick that's there to propel the plot along in its own way.
Well, I think that it's very much, it's written that way. I mean, he's, for lack of a better term, too British. He's only mildly entertained that his death has been faked by his government.
Yeah.
So that he can go do the plot of this film.
Yeah.
And he just sort of like, everything is approached in the script and also in the performance in this sort of like, well, here's what I'm up against, so I suppose that this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
It's just sort of this like kind of bored, kind of amused, I guess I don't have anything better to do, so whatever, approach that is, to Hitchcock's confession, own admittance of it, is really hard to have a protagonist who doesn't particularly give a crap about pushing the plot along. Yeah,
exactly. And it led to frustration with him. But regardless of that little interference and annoyance, that's not the only thing that's wrong with this film. And I think that the bigger issue at hand is that the suspense is not laid out in the same way that we have with the 39 Steps or The Man Who Knew Too Much. And I'm not even talking about laying the bomb under the table. It's just that it seems like we're being led on a few too many red herring, or there's a red herring in this movie that lasts longer than I feel like it should, even though it brings up a very great visual sequence in the movie. And I guess it would be a good time to jump into the plot of the film.
Okay.
Yeah. Were you going to say something?
No, I just, I think that like I was being facetious in my side, just to kind of being like in a movie with a reluctant protagonist, the plot becomes very plotting.
But here's the thing. We're not alone with just John Gielgud. We have 4 other charismatic people to guide him. Very charismatic. But the story starts off with, we are clearly seeing that a spy plot is afoot with a body that has been removed death has been faked, and that a funeral arrangement has been set up to establish this death, with a wonderful one-armed man smoking a cigarette scene and him trying to lift a casket up. And then we get some imagery of World War I and what's going on with it, flashes of newspapers and such. And we're led into the war offices where a novelist known as Edgar Brody, he returns home, but he discovers his own obituary. He goes into the war office, and he's basically told, you're going to be given the identity of Richard Ashenden, and you will assist with tracking down and eliminating a person who is he's basically trying to create further trouble in the Middle East. and he's a German agent who's working both sides. He is given a task to meet up with a contact through there, and his assistant in all of this. And I want to be very careful about how I introduce Peter Lorre in this film. Returning to the Hitchcock fold for his second and only other appearance in Hitchcock's filmography, which to me is a travesty that he wasn't in more.
Yes, I can help you with that.
He's called the General, but he's also known as...
Well, yes. So his Ashenden's sort of controller, says, we call him the hairless Mexican.
Yep.
Oh, why? Well, chiefly because he's got a lot of curly hair and isn't a Mexican. You can call him the General. He isn't a general, but he'll appreciate the compliment.
Yeah, exactly. And my favorite line, lady killer, eh? Not just with the ladies. Peter Lorre is everything, man. And
not only ladies.
Yeah.
And it's this wonderful, like a jaw-dropping moment from a good place is like the needle that was thread with that double entendre of what you can get by is like, well, he's an assassin, so he's saying, no, he doesn't kill women. He doesn't only kill women, he will also kill men.
Is that what it means? Is it? Is it?
But the euphemism of, like, you know, we're dealing with a bisexual character, to be doing that in 1936, I was like, that, and that is right after, by the way, he has chased a woman up the stairs.
Yeah.
Who is like, it's the pure Pepe Le Pew to the cat moment, is what this is.
Let's
and
be
that's
careful
just like,
how
he's a real lady killer, huh? Not only ladies.
Yeah. Which, by the way, the General and Pepe Le Pew do not really work well today, but...
No, they do not.
But regardless, this is my favorite Peter Lorre performance in a Hitchcock movie for a very selfish reason, and it's because I really like when Peter Lorre gets to play a good guy. I love him as a villain, obviously. I mean, obviously, he toes that line down the middle in Casablanca playing Ugati, but generally he would play the heavy or a sidekick or a villain, chief among his most famous roles. I mean, like, the biggest one is his debut, which is M by Fritz Lang, where he plays a child killer, but he plays it obviously with the empathy that makes that film a masterpiece.
Yeah.
In
Lorre
this film, he's just a
steals
goofball.
This whole movie. He's masterful in it. I absolutely fell in love with him. I loved every single scene he was in. He was, although we've given his character introduction, but we actually haven't given his true name. It is General Pompilio Montezuma de la Villa de Conda de la Rue.
Yeah. Thank you for saying it, because I wouldn't have been able to get through it without messing up some words.
I practiced.
This character has every single name imaginable, and thankfully we have the cipher of him as just the General, because it just makes it so much easier, obviously.
Yes.
But Brody, or Ashenden, as he's now referred to, gets his mission. And he arrives at the Hotel Excelsior in Switzerland. And I love the transition of going to the Hotel Excelsior by having that close-up on the letters that form Hotel Excelsior going backwards. And it's an attribute to Hitchcock that he does this not just before but down the line, but using imagery to suggest transitions. My favorite among them being how we are introduced to Santa Rosa in Shadow of a Doubt. By just having Joseph Cotton saying Santa Rosa for the telegram, and then we are whisked away to Santa Rosa. So he arrives at the hotel, he checks in, and finds out that he has a wife registered at the hotel already. And this is an element of the plot he did not know was going to happen. And he enters the hotel room and to essentially meet his wife. And there's another guest in the room, Robert Marvin, played by Robert Young.
And his wife is, her character is Elsa Carrington, played by Madeleine Carroll. Yes,
exactly. And Robert Marvin here is an American roustabout, or is he? We'll find out. But he's clearly trying to get Elsa to go to bed with him because it's just a big old sea of hitting on Madeline Carroll here throughout his entire performance.
Yeah, and again, like I'm not in any way, shape, or form versed in the history of British code, so I don't know where we are in terms of what's allowed and what's not allowed in 1936. But I actually think that like the way that this is presented is they have already spent a night together.
It could be it definitely is implied that if not, then they have at least fooled around at a certain point. Within regards to censorship at this time, America is the one that is getting very tight knit,
right,
with its approach to sex, violence, all the whole gamut, right? We've talked about this in previous episodes, but British censorship is a little different, primarily because British custom, it's a little bit more accepting towards sexuality, but violence is something it condemns.
Gotcha. Yeah,
so,
no, that tracks. Because, yeah. I mean, because Ashenden comes in the room, and we don't even see Elsa Carrington because she is undressed, still getting ready.
Yep, exactly.
And he actually runs into Robert Marvin.
Yep.
So yeah, so it's definitely implied that there's a level of comfortability that is not doesn't lend one to believe that there's a that the pursuit hasn't already kind of been fulfilled in some way, shape, or form there.
Yeah, what I find interesting about this particular introduction is how much it mirrors what we see previously in the 39 Steps with two people who aren't meant to, or who wouldn't be together under any circumstances, are forced into this pairing. And this is obviously something we see done to, I would think, better perfection for the British period in The Lady Vanishes, because it turns it into a full-blown A plot, or B plot, I guess, where it's essential to the emotional arc of the story. As they get to know each other, the general is introduced to not only reconnects with Ashenden, but also finally he meets Elsa, and he goes on a tangent about how he doesn't get a girl, but the Ashenden does.
Yes, yeah, he freaks out about it, and it's at this, it's maybe a good time to mention that Peter Lorre is actually the one who sold Hitchcock the rights to this to the stories.
Yeah.
So this was a role that not only was he perfect for, but like clearly he was able to sink his teeth in.
Yeah, and his characterization in this. This is going to sound like an insult, but believe me, it's not. He is the Costello to John Gielgud's Abbott. And they play off of each other in such a way that I can't help but be bemused anytime I see them both on screen, regardless of how stiff Gielgud is.
Mm-hmm.
Because their banter back and forth is just... It's a perfect setup for Peter Lorre to come out on top, and I'm always in favor of that.
Yeah.
So as we find out, as we go along, obviously, they are to contact. They're going to come to contact a double agent at a church, and the agent is supposed to be the church organist, but they find him dead as they are praying, in a scene that is very Hitchcockian, dealing with some macabre imagery within a church and contrasting the elements of guilt and suspicion within that setting. It just looks fantastic. It's beautifully shot. It's
phenomenal sound design.
Yep, and it's clearly storyboarded and executed according to specific composition, and it's just fantastic to look at. They through a button. They are able to determine who might be the one who executed this church organist, and they go to the casino. They meet Elsa there, and the button is dropped into a gambling table, and a mountaineer, Kapor, played by Percy Marmont, it assumes that it's his button. So they assume that this is their person they've been sent to eliminate. So they all meet up along with Robert Marvin, who is pretty much just butting in with everything. Or is he butting in? We'll find out. But they all agree to go up on a mountaining excursion with the intent is for the general's intent is to kill Kapor because he assumes he is the man. But Gielgud, in the rare moment of him actually doing anything or having any interest, has doubts about this person as we go through this scene in the Alps. Mm-hmm. And what we get essentially is a red herring scene or moment in the film that obviously doesn't lead to much other than the morality that we find ourselves in later on in the story with Madeleine Carroll and John Gielgud's feelings towards war and violence in general and murder. But the scene itself is classic Hitchcock POV, dealing with a sinister scenario and the suspense of there's nothing I can do to stop it. When we have Gielgud looking through a telescope as the general and Kapor have gone off alone to the mountain, we see that we know what the general is about to do, and all we can see is Gielgud hoping that it won't happen.
Yeah, and the what felt like a departure for me, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but the one of the things that makes this sequence really watching it, it's honestly a little jarring, but it ends up being very poignant and particularly unique, is that this entire sequence of Ashendon and the general, going up this mountain with Kapor and then trying to decide, arguing about whether they should actually kill him or not, and then Ashendon leaving to leave the general to the dirty deed, is all intercut with Elsa, with Kapor's wife and their dog back in some hotel room.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I have ever seen like this level of magical realism in a Hitchcock film before.
Yeah.
Where as the suspense is building, as you know that the general is going to kill Kapor,
yeah,
we cut back and forth to the parlor as the dog is getting more and more frantic, scratching at the bottom of this door, trying to be let out, ending in the culminating that in the death of Kapor, this dog just lets out this howl,
yeah,
knowing that its master died. And at the same time, the wife knows that the dog knows, and Elsa knows that that's what's just happened.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I've seen that type of magical realism in a Hitchcock film before communicated in that way.
Watch Shadow of a Doubt, because it comes into play with Shadow of a Doubt, but I think it's also grounded much more in Shadow of a Doubt. This is straight up magical realism. In Shadow of a Doubt, it's grounded in a character's theory and how the world works and how coincidence plays into that favor. So it's more technically thought out than this. Gotcha. And with that magical realism also leads to Madeleine Carroll's disillusionment with her whole mission. As after Kapor's death, they meet up in what is assumedly to be a celebration that their mission is accomplished, only to get a telegram via decoding that they got the wrong man.
Yes.
And, obviously the general can't help but have a good laugh about it because he just finds it, well, it's just another mess up in the line of duty, I suppose. And this leads to the only moments of interest with John Gielgud in terms of him basically being like, look, I mean, they basically profess their love for each other, and within that also declare that they are no longer going to be a part of this fight.
Right.
And that in lies the issue of, with all the coding of what is coming with the Nazis during World War II that Hitchcock does in his British films, this one decidedly decides to be isolationist, which is fascinating. Because it doesn't keep consistent with the other films he would do where that coding of the messages of the call to war that is coming to Europe and how they were so carefully laid out in the other films. The film before this, 39 Steps, is very much alluding to the threat of Nazi Germany and its impending doom. And in this film, as we see by the very end, the tone of it suggests that it should be an isolationist result. So that's a pretty fascinating thing coming from a director who has essentially coded his films as such to be like, look, I know what's fucking coming. How do you not fucking see it? So within that, they agree to give up the whole business and have Gielgud resign. And the general comes in and says, first of all, he gives a great speech about giving up and what that actually means.
And the privilege of being in the position of being able to give up.
Yep. And that also is that's the coding that we find, where Hitchcock is able to telegraph, hello, Hitler's coming, hello. Like, that thing that you had to do because you couldn't address things directly because you didn't want to upset that stupid man and his mustache. So, that Peter Lorre is the hero of this movie. It's not even a question. Like, he's the real hero of the movie.
But I think that the movie is it's a half of a film. The first half is brilliant. And once the reveal that they got the wrong man happens, it really falls off very quickly.
Yeah.
And I think that part of that is because I think that this film, from a character standpoint, is about disillusionment, about war, and about death and death in war, and how pointless it is, and how perpetual it is. And I think that there's a version of this movie that's very interesting where Elsa is the main character, because I think that she really goes through the main character arc of entering the whole scenario as essentially an adolescent.
Yeah.
She signs up to be a secret agent because she wants some excitement and she finds it so interesting.
Yeah.
And as soon as she knows that she has taken part in the killing of someone, she immediately starts suffering from PTS. She becomes
PTSD. Yeah.
She really becomes very
despondent.
She disassociates and is like, let's just get out of here. I don't want to be involved in any of this. And so I think that there is, there's that sort of thing going on, but there's another half of a movie that needs to happen.
Yeah. Because the second half of the movie that happens, while on a technical level looks exciting and has a lot of sophistication of stuff we were talking about earlier in this episode, story-wise, it's just kind of like it falls off. It slowly tumbles off a cliff. It doesn't happen all at once. He basically the general convinces Ashenden to come with him to follow up on a tip that he got from a woman that he romanced in his bed. About basically a chocolate factory that this woman's boyfriend works at is basically the German post office,
right?
For German soldiers, and so they go to investigate it, and the cross cut between this is that Elsa has just decided that he's not going to give up. I'm just going to leave without him, and within that, she reconnects with Marvin one last time, who gives her a framed picture of him with a mustache, because it's a callback from earlier, and he tells her where he's about to go, which is to Greece, and they as we go back to the chocolate factory, cross-cutting between all this, we get this big, elaborate set piece, an action scene, cross-cutting between different pieces of footage of the machinery of a chocolate factory, the making of a chocolate factory. Like, there's never been a chocolate factory more elaborate in cinema up until 1974. So, the action scene in itself is a sophistication of stuff we were seeing in stuff like No.17, and even also stuff like the 39 Steps, where you're able to construct a massive action sequence out of this one place with this little material that you have at disposal of. And it works as a scene, and it utilizes a lot of loud, overbearing sound design in order to basically let the action play out rather than any dialogue that might happen in between.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, kind of interesting silent film tropes going on, but a fun use of sound from a film perspective, in that characters are constantly talking to each other.
Yeah.
But you can't hear them because of the noise. And so you're left to only understand and follow what's going on through the visual storytelling, which is pretty fun.
And and within this, they find out who via notice from intelligence, in a scene where R has his shirt off and is looking like a fox of an old man, I guess. They reveal that they know who our actual villain is, and it's Marvin. Whoa, twist!
The charming Marvin.
Who would have thought that Robert Young would be the villain of this movie? It's almost as if we couldn't trust the American in this movie. The one person who has no discernible accent, obviously. Like, it's interesting how it's like, because Robert Young, when you see him in a British movie of this era, when he's still working in Hollywood, it's like, what's Robert Young doing here? Well, he worked with Hitchcock. Not unlike actors would want to work with him down the line, but this is one who just came over the boat to do it. Yeah. So they go to the train station to intercept, and he reconnects with Elsa, and he reveals to her what they know, and this is our first instance of a bomb under the table, really. We give Elsa the information that Marvin is our agent who's trying to cause chaos in the Middle East, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so she's gonna go in now and essentially keep him there while they go to before they can go to get him. But she doesn't want Ashendon to kill him.
Yeah.
So but the problem with this bomb under the table is that it doesn't become one, because it doesn't draw any suspense, because Marvin already suspects the moment that she has entered his train compartment that she knows who he is.
Right.
He's not fooled. So then an element like this that then gets carried into Sabotage and then is perfected in other films, this is really its basic seed, which is just like, okay, one character knows a piece of information that the other doesn't, except the other character does, because he's one step ahead. So it's interesting to see how stuff like this then gets a physical manifestation in the next film and then becomes an idea in further films to follow. So it took two character setups and a physical realization to then create an idea of suspense that we now hold dear today. Starts with those pieces. And then basically we're led to another train climax, which he gets to perfect upon from number 17, because this train sequence looks way better, doesn't it?
So much miles better.
Yeah, visually stunning. We get some planes coming in and taking out the gun turrets on top of the train. It looks badass for a 30s film, man. Let alone a film made at a period in Europe's history where they are basically about to enter war. It's pretty amazing what he was able to accomplish in this era from a visual standpoint. And I think this stands above it. And what it leads to is a huge train crash. Prior to that, Elsa is once again saying, John Gielgud, don't kill people. And it sucks. You know why it sucks, Marshall? Because once the train crashes and everybody's all busted up, Robert Young's on his death keel, our dear friend the General walks up and gets a cigarette from Mr. Young, and Robert Young takes that time to grab a gun that he had conveniently placed in his coat pocket and shoot the general.
And is he getting a cigarette from him, or is he giving him a cigarette?
Oh, he's lighting the cigarette.
Yeah, he's being polite.
Yeah.
And he gets killed for it.
Yeah, exactly. And then shoots. And Robert Young dies, and the general gets up there, calls out his name, and then falls in dramatic Hitchcock fashion. And it's the saddest part of the movie, because if Elsa had just learned what had to happen, because it's I'm not advocating for violence, obviously. Murder is murder. But Peter Lorre didn't have to die for your decisions. And again, I'm kind of being facetious about it, but we do get a really good death scene from it. Yeah. It's interesting how it's drawn out to that bitter end, because it normally in a situation like that you'd probably get the train crash. And I'm wondering if it's because the general is the kind of character that he is, that he had to be the heroic sacrifice. It's just the way that character is presented. It almost seems like we needed to. I don't know what else would be the concluding factor on that. But what I get out of it is that, like it shows Elsa, I guess, the further costs of war, but I don't know, it just sucks. It just feels like that's a character that didn't have to necessarily get bumped off, but we get this great dramatic moment out of it. So
yeah, I mean, I think it's easy morality play bullshit. He's the assassin. He likes killing. He doesn't mind that they killed Kapor on accident.
He's bisexual, so
yeah, and he's a bisexual, and he's a and so I think that it unfortunately sort of just kind of comes down to that. Yeah. But one thing I find particularly funny, maybe, or interesting, but is that in the Hitchcock Truffaut interviews, Truffaut forgot the ending, and Hitchcock forgot the ending. So I do not feel in any way, shape, or form out of line saying this is half of a good film and then it tapers off, that it's like even a total Hitchcock, like the Hitchcock fan of all time, and Hitchcock himself forgot how it ended, because it's just like, yeah, whatever, that was Secret Agent, and then it was done. Well, on to the next movie.
Well, Francois, I'm pretty sure it ended with Peter Lorre shooting Robert Young in the face and then joining a battalion of American soldiers in about 10 years, and then he would help them hunt down and kill Nazis and scalp them. That was my initial ending. Now, I don't remember if I shot that or not. I'm pretty sure I did. Pretty sure I did. Good.
Absolutely.
Next question, Francois. I like this fake answer that he's given.
Yeah, I like it too.
But so, alas, the film actually ends, though, with a montage of the war coming to an end thanks to this tip. It's insinuated that this is it's much like the film 1917. It's insinuated that this one will help win the entire war. It ends with back at headquarters, R and all the other soldiers are celebrating, and he looks at a postcard that says, back at home, but never again. And then imposing the image of John Gielgud and Madeleine Carroll happily ever after. And that's one of the reasons why I find it fascinating, is that statement in the postcard, back home but never again, is telegraphing a message contradictory to the obvious brilliance of Peter Lorre's moment in the hotel room when he's telling him about the luxury of being able to give up.
Yeah.
And it's very, very... I wonder if that is I didn't look into it. I don't know if that's a code thing or not, because a lot of this doesn't have to do with explicitly content censorship. It has to do with not wanting to offend other governments. This is before Neville Chamberlain goes over and has his, now we know, failed summit with Hitler, that then leads to Churchill ascending office and the invasion of Britain beginning. So this is all precursor. So everybody's tiptoeing around shit. And America's no different. It would take Warner Brothers in 1938 with Confessions of a Nazi Spy to break this entire footseeing around, So, but I just found it a very fascinating way to end a movie that, for the most part, I really enjoyed and I thought lends itself well into Hitchcock's espionage oeuvre. But alas...
Well, I think that, from the research I could do on this and interviews, it seems like regarding so the plot was sort of cobbled together from two different novels from the Ashendon series. One of them being The Traitor, one of them being The Hairless Mexican, and it seems to me that the plot was stolen from The Hairless Mexican. And I remember reading that Hitchcock said that the love story is stolen from The Traitor. So if the second half of the film, or one of the through lines for the film story, is this love story, then the love story needs to end on a good note. And the only real way to make this end on a good note that doesn't have both Elsa and Ashendon sort of like embracing being assassins and secret agents and going with their head held high into the war efforts, requires them to leave the war and to say, no, this is bad and this sort of thing. And they need to set up the moral,
the moral compass of this film, because
and what happens when you get consumed with it in terms of Peter Lorre's character, the general, is he has to have his comeuppance. But I mean, so as far as like it playing as a historical allegory and the morality and the ethics of that, and the sort of like being able to look back and look ahead and see where you are now and what do you want to say about where you are now using the story from before. But also having to stick to these stories tropes, and then also just sort of like using what you have to pull from your source material. And it may have been part of the contract to say like, I'm only gonna, when Laurie bought the rights, it could have been, I'm only gonna sell the rights to you if this aspect of the love story is maintained. And so that was the only way they could really shoehorn it in. That does sort of give a mixed message at the end of the day. Yeah.
And regardless of how the film turns out, with that ending in mind, like it's not to my mind, it's not terrible. It's just, it's surprising given the trajectory that, his British era films tend to have with, even as early as the 39 Steps of the Man Who Knew Too Much, laying in the foundation of the impending doom that is about to hit Europe. But it would make sense if this also came down to the morality line, which I believe you're right in that regard, because it would make more sense within the romantic outline, and one is trumping the other. And I think ultimately there's only so much you would be able to do with a World War I story that's clearly an allegory for what's coming in World War II without dipping into tricky territory, especially when this is 1936. This is, like I said before, Britain really gets embroiled in it.
Right.
So the film comes out, and critically, for the reception of it is just like it's I would say mixed, because people are praising various elements, but they don't say they all add up. And I think that kind of touches into what we were discussing, which is there's one half of a good movie here, and then it starts to slowly but surely sink, and then it doesn't live up to the potential that it's given with. And if we're talking about two different stories that are then combined into one, that clearly one is dominating the other to detrimental effect.
Yeah. I mean, the name of your movie is Secret Agent, but it ends up actually being a love story. Yeah. Is a little tough. Yeah, exactly. There's right now though, I'll say this though, in spite of this, in the Examiner from 1937, it was listed among some of the best films of 1936. So there were this didn't have
a supremely ill reception. And currently on Rotten Tomatoes, from a modern critical standpoint, it has a 90%. So people do hold this in regard, and I think a lot of this has to do with time removed and able to appreciate it compared to maybe, say, the first film we talked about today.
Yeah,
but
that's fair.
So I think also time has been kinder to it as a result. And even with me, I liked the film. I enjoyed it. Like it's not perfect, but I enjoyed it. And so this kind of wraps up our discussion today about how a filmmaker who misses the mark is still able to find the tools that he needs to then go on to create memorable classics thanks to those techniques. Marshall, do you have anything you want to add before we wrap it up?
Not really. I mean, I think, well, first I just want to thank you again for having me on here and really putting me in a position. I don't think I would have ever been exposed to these films, were it not for your invitation here. And I really learned a lot, and it was really fascinating, even in the frustrating moments or the moments of boredom, or even sometimes outrage at what was going on. I think it, especially as someone who is, it's really difficult for me to kind of like carry forward with a project or an idea about something until like everything is in its perfect place, and it's sort of this just like I want everything to be just so, and I want the stars to align, and so this experience of watching these three films has been really interesting to, and really good, I think, for me to see a filmmaker who was willing and is willing to try something over and over and over again, and sort of have this attitude of like, there's something here.
Yeah.
Like there's something to the drama of a train chase. There's something to a train crash. And so I'm going to pour my all into it with everything I have at my disposal right now. And then I'm going to just see what happens. And then I can take a look back and see, okay, what worked, what didn't work, and I'll try it again. And if that doesn't work, I'll try it again, and I'll try it again. This level of integrity to say, I trust in myself to know that when I think there's something there, it's worth chasing until I find it. Not until I'm proven wrong, but is this sort of like megalomaniac, headstrong person of saying, this much is right. I may not know how to get it yet. I may not know how to find it or execute it, but I know there's something there. And so that being able to kind of like see that process in play in part in these early films was really fascinating. And none of them, not one of them is a great film. Not one of them is a good film in whole. But they are definitely worth pursuing, so much so that I think that I would say my last sort of message would be that, oh my God, these movies need to be restored and given some care.
Yes, it should be,
because they were so hard to watch. I can't tell you, as great as the script was, as wonderful as Laurie's acting was in Secret Agent, I had to watch the movie with subtitles on because the audio was so bad I could not understand what people were saying.
Yeah,
and that is doing such a disservice to these amazing films.
These are films that are, and this is the first time we've really encountered this on the Shamley Silhouette. These are films, all of them are ones that have not been properly restored or released, at least stateside. The big part of this is that with the exposure of Hitchcock to younger audiences, that comes with the territory of bootleg DVDs. How I had to watch Secret Agent and No.17 is through a Mill Creek DVD. Mill Creek is just going to take a copy of the film that exists and put it on there and do nothing else with it, because that's its stock and trade and that's how it makes money. That's also the reason why a lot of titles from a company that has had a lot of legal troubles in the past 3 years does not have good transfers of their films. And given the fact that that particular company is embroiled in what it is, and the libraries are going to be all over the place here to next Sunday, but it's relevant to point out that that company, and I'm talking about Weinstein and Miramax to that respect, because those libraries got sold off. But we find ourselves in a similar situation where those films are at risk of being mistreated over time if we're not careful.
I had to watch Secret Agent on Amazon Prime. It was a below standard definition.
Yeah.
The audio was horrible. Strauss's Great Waltz I watched on YouTube.
Yep.
And No.17, I had to literally do a Google search for No.17 streaming, and the only place I could find it was some website called Daily Motion that I had to download the app for to be able to watch it. And all of them are in horrible shape, both audio, in both audio and visually. It's really a shame.
Yeah, but yeah, and this is a situation where I do believe that ultimately, when it's all said and done, these are films that hopefully after COVID is done, with wreaking its havoc as it stands, that projects like Kino Lorber and Scream Factory and all these other places can continue to restore and get these films out in proper formats. Because something like Secret Agent, I think, absolutely deserves a transfer. Waltzes from Vienna, I think, deserves a great deal of attention to it, and nothing else to dig up further history. And even No.17, which, in spite of what we've discussed about it, is a film that I think should be there for the posterity of Hitchcock's career, but also just an example of even the master can have a tricky time at times.
Yeah. Well, oddly enough, No.17 seems like it's going to see the light of day in terms of restoration before the other two. It's on Kino Lorber's docket. There's just no timeline announcement yet.
Right. So within that, we hope that everything is able to come to fruition in that respect, because Kino Lorber has been doing a great job at restoring those films. But that's going to be wrapping it up for the Shamley Silhouette this week. We've had a wonderful talk about not only films that need to be rescued, but also films that show that even the ones that have the biggest legendary status of all time have a few misses, but also where there's hope in those misses. The first misses we talked about were ones in his later career and how that related to him not letting go of certain things. But this is the formation of a lot of those tropes that he would later hold on to, sometimes to detrimental effect, but others to great success. That's going to be it for this week. You can find the Shamley Silhouette on RealNerdsPodcast.com and the Real Nerds Podcast feed. Starting with this episode, we will also be coming to you through the website first and then on the feed later, so that we can get this sucker wrapped up by Hitch's birthday. That's the goal, with the final episode coming out on August 13th, and it will be Adam Roach from The Secret History of Hollywood coming down to chat about a general Hitchcock conversation, which was pre-recorded. And but yeah, until next time, good night.